What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Shawn P. Greene. This is the Shawn P. Greene Show. That's right. We are I'm live in Buffalo, New York. And quite possibly, a guest we have on today, also from snowy Buffalo. Yes, we had a little snow last night, overnight. About 11 p.m. it started snowing a little bit. Going outside today, I don't know, it's only about an inch. It's not that bad at all. So here I am once again, Shawn P. Greene. Today is February 25th, 2022, a day after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Depending on what your time zone is, it's about a day after. And I got all kinds of messages now from all over. Too much technology. Anywho, I got a special guest that's coming on. He's on now. I'm going to bring him on in a second. And we'll do a brief introduction as to who this mystery guest is today. So, stand by. Here we go. In a second, we'll bring him on. His name is Alan. I do not want to butcher the last name, so I'll let him say his last name. So we're going to add him right now. Here he comes. Alan, let me just turn down. What's up, buddy? Hey,
I'm good.
let me. I know, man. I was just talking about it. We had a little bit of snow last night. Started about 11 o'clock. Kathy Hochul was warning us to make sure we don't downplay this. Hang on, let me get you on equal terms here with me. There you go, perfect. So, Alan, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Cole. Trying to adjust to this as I'll it's not too far in the future till I move back home from LA. LA is toxic and I'm over it.
So you're actually deciding to come back to New York State permanently?
Yeah, I want to come back and take care of my mom, reconnect with my old friends for maybe a year or so, and then the long-term plan is to get a nice camper and travel the national park system. You know, after serving the country for 24 years, I want to actually see the country that I gave all that time to.
Beautiful, awesome. And for people that do know me, they know that I was in the U.S. Navy, but I was an enlisted person. I was on the flight deck of the USS Ranger for the first 2 years, serving in the Gulf War, the first one. And then I also was Master at Arms for the last 2 years on that same ship. But I only served 4 years. I did 2 years reserves after that in Tampa, and that was the end of my career. Alan was on the same ship as I was. When he was deployed with the USS Ranger. And you were what? What was your position?
Well, I started out as the lowest ranking officer, ensign, but by the time I got out, I was a full commander, which is the equivalent of a lieutenant colonel in the other services.
Full commander. So how many years did it take you to get to the commander position?
I think I promoted to commander, which is 05. I think that was year 17. So it takes a while. I mean, if you do 20 and you didn't screw the pooch, you should make 05. If you started out enlisted like you, and then you go Maverick, enlisted to officer, you tend to see those guys top out at like lieutenant or lieutenant commander, just because you've already given 3 to 5 years enlisted, and then you have the second set of training to go through. Right.
Now, a lot of people take the path to warrant officer in their trade. So, like we had our warrant officer started out as, an airman, which is the lowest E1 level in the Navy, and he was chief warrant officer, 4th class, I believe that's how you call it.
Right.
In the aviation fuels air department. So he was he had a long career, 30 years, I believe, total. So anyways, I want to ask you this question. What
Sure.
year did you actually enter service?
I feel like
I'm not trying to date you.
No, I feel like I'm on a first date. It's like, hey, let's just go right to the age. I graduated Lancaster High School in 80 and Canisius College in 84. And then I literally left for the Navy like 4 weeks later. In fact, it was funny because I couldn't swim, long story. And then I found
Ah,
out that when you get to officer training for the Navy for pilots, you have to swim like a mile with a flight suit on. And so
hmm.
I learned to swim at the Buffalo Athletic Club,
Wow.
and at Canisius, I actually somehow ended up 2 credits shy to graduate. I had enough classes. Like I took some 4 credit classes to
Hmm.
get extra credits, and then in the second senior semester, I thought I'll have a lighter load. And the dean called me in about a month before graduation and said, "Hey, you can't graduate. You need one more class." And I said, "I'm joining the Navy." They actually gave me a pass because of joining the military, so that was kind of cool of Canisius. But so it was I started in 1984 and I retired in January of 2008.
So we'll pause. Give me a second. So you actually joined before Top Gun came out. That was the
Yeah,
question I was getting to, because
it's funny,
a lot of people were inspired to join the U.S. Navy because
right?
of Top Gun, which released in
For
1986.
sure, for sure. And what got me was it's a long story, but I had signed an enlisted contract to be a security guard. It had this great description, we'll fire the M16 machine gun and blah blah blah, and then it turned out that that's basically a gate guard. Which there's nothing wrong with being a gate guard, but I wanted to fly because I had seen the movie An Officer and a Gentleman
Ah,
in my sophomore summer at Canisius. I saw this movie and I'm like, man, I want to go do that. That's cool. In Buffalo, I love the city, and that's why I'm coming back. But we're backwards is the wrong word. Let's just say not at the center of the information flow, right? So
mhm.
I didn't know about the military. I didn't know about flying. I didn't know anything about Hollywood. I don't know how I mean, I'm interested to hear how you got into the business. I always am interested in those stories, but
Mhm.
I didn't even know you could fly in the Navy. I didn't know that aircraft landed on on ships until I saw this movie. And so then I was super inspired to go do it. And but I still had 2 years of college to go. So I went down, the recruiter I went to, again, it didn't really resonate that flying Navy. I saw this movie, it was Navy, it was talking about guys going to fly, but in my mind, it was still flying was Air Force. So I went to the Air Force
Mm.
recruiter, and the guy's like, why wait 2 years to get your degree? Join now and you can go to college for free. It wasn't until I went with a buddy who wanted to be a lawyer for the Navy
Mm.
that one of the flying recruiters grabbed me and he said, the path you're on is going to be a longer path to the cockpit. And then he showed me a couple of videos. So it wasn't Top Gun, but it was this flying video. And you're like, your eyes just glaze over and you're like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And then that's the exact path I went on. In fact, I went through the school that was depicted in the movie An Officer and a Gentleman. And then I went through the school that was depicted in the movie Top Gun. But you're right, when Top Gun came out, sorry, it's just I was up kind of late watching. I thought we might get around to China at some point, and it's okay if we don't. But just in case we do, I did a crap ton of research last night so I could be informed.
No, we're getting into it. Trust me.
Okay, cool, cool,
Oh,
cool.
uh,
So then when I got in the Navy, I was in flight school for the F-14. Now picture
mm,
this: I'm at Virginia Beach, Virginia, in the F-14 training squadron,
mm.
and the movie Top Gun comes out, and it was like, now I do fully believe in God because it was just a candy store at the officers club every Friday.
Interesting. Now, there's a couple like before I joined in '89. It was like right after West Seneca West is where I went to high school. Graduated within 2 months. I was in a delayed entry program that gives you like a year to figure out what you want to do and all that stuff. And long story short, my only goal in life was to be on the flight deck, and I had no idea what jobs they did. I didn't even care. Right? I want to be on a flight deck, man. I just want to go out, travel the world, and just be a part of open air out in the sea. I didn't want to be down under in the in the bilge or whatever they call them. I'm sorry. Well, we have like
The
in-
bilge pumps.
bilge pumps and all that. They had pump rooms and filter rooms and all this stuff down below for the aviation fuels department. So that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the open air, and I was afraid of flights. So me being an aircraft would have been very difficult in the very beginning. My very first cruise, I didn't couldn't even handle from going from Long Beach dry dock to San Diego. I threw up my apples for real. So try to put me up in an aircraft. That would have been even more difficult. At any rate, yeah, Top Gun was kind of like, the cool thing to be in high school. Everybody wanted to be Maverick or Iceman or all that junk. I wasn't caught up in all that. What really got me was the series that was short lived called I
Pensacola
think
Wings of Gold.
it's called Aircraft Carrier. I think it was an
Oh, that was
ABC.
the documentary series.
No. This was a drama
Oh, I gotta look that up.
in the mid '80s, just called either Aircraft Carrier or just Carrier.
I think it was
Um,
Carrier.
You're right. Yeah, it was Carrier. So that was the series. I watched it. I was like, wow. I was just fascinated with all the shots they were getting outside of the carrier itself, and I'm like, man, I just want to do that. I don't even care what I'm doing, just want to be there. So I in A school to be a air traffic controller, but I failed a half year of health, and I had to make that up with basic training, but it lost my A school, so I had to just go wherever they sent me. So, long story short, that was the series that got me to want to be on that ship. So, and then post that, I think Flight of the Intruder was being filmed. We had Danny Glover on the Ranger. I was like peeping, on the flight deck watching. So that got me interested in wanting to be in film, just because we had the presence of Hollywood right there on the ship.
That's
and that
awesome, dude. You're only the second person that I'm personally friends with who their pathway to the Navy was Hollywood.
Yeah.
And you're definitely only the second person I know other than myself. And it's funny that there's so many synergies. It's Buffalo, it's Navy, it's entertainment, and military service, community service, all that stuff, coming back home, etc. But Hollywood, promotes in such a way that they were super excited, the Navy, to get Top Gun Maverick going, and now sadly it's been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. But
Yep.
for me, it was the movie Officer and a Gentleman that got me interested in the Navy, and then it was the Navy, because I don't know if you ever actually deployed then from that story, but when you're deployed back in the Cold War days, which I have mixed feelings, but we could be getting a new Cold War, and all the kids under 35 who are more concerned about followers and social media, they might learn about the real world, because we know what the Cold War was, and I think we have a different perspective on what's going on today, and I know we'll get to that.
Absolutely.
But so then in the Navy deployed, you would go MCON, emissions control. You couldn't be sending out any signals, and so we weren't getting. I mean, they had the Armed Forces radio television station, but that was. The biggest entertainment we really had was watching the landing camera for the jets coming aboard. But then when flight ops secured, there was nothing. So, we would carry projects out with us, but that's when we were making short films. I didn't even know it was called a short film. Just somebody had a camera, somebody had a microphone, somebody knew how to edit. Then we were writing. So we were writing, directing, producing, all of this content. But it was like 1987, 88. Nobody on the ship with me was a film guy, but we were doing some special effects, and it was really, mundane, basic stuff. But
Sure.
It was doing all that stuff that when it came time to retire, and it was a few years before, that you start thinking, all right, what do I want to do next? And the only other thing I had really ever been interested in trying was, entertainment, and specifically acting. So then the Navy got, a Hollywood film got me into the Navy, and then the Navy really is what genesis coming back into entertainment. And I'll close with this. We can move on, but Top Gun, the first one was while I went to flight school, and that got it all started. And then here at the end of the career, Top Gun Maverick comes out, and Tom Cruise is like, I want a very specific guy. So there was some stuff in the movie where a lot of it's practical. Tom Cruise is notoriously famous for doing his own stunts. But there's some things you just can't shoot in the air. So they had an airplane on the end of a stick, mounted to a chunk of metal.
Nice.
Just the cockpit. And then they would shoot stuff, with the big green screen. We were at Universal, and he wanted, so there's two planes in the scene, but you're not bringing the lead actors who are getting a lot of money in to stand on the ground and talk to these guys to give them something to act off of. So he wanted a real pilot and a real actor. There just isn't that many in LA. So
Sure.
I was sitting next to the director and the editor on the microphone talking to these pilots. And yes, I did a couple scenes with Tom.
Beautiful.
And I got to see that whole process. And that was just really an amazing learning experience. I mean, I got a free master's acting class for 7 days, you know. And I'll just say this: the movie scenes, the flying scenes in Top Gun 2,
yeah,
it's going to blow everybody away.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of the trailer, and I could see that there's a little bit more fancy trickery with the flying, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. That's going to be, I've been looking forward to seeing it. You know, anything Navy is, even McCall's Navy. Sometimes I'll watch that. You know, the old school stuff, comedy. It doesn't matter. But yeah, man, I've been waiting to see this re-release of this film, and you know, it's been like 3 years delayed now, I think.
Total. Yep, because of our friend coronavirus.
That's right. I'm glad we're getting out of this. I mean, who knows if we're going to totally get out of it, but I yet another variant of Omicron. So I don't even want to get into that yet.
Yeah, please.
So let me pronounce your last name again, because I'll butcher it. Trust me. I mean,
well, the Englishized is Pietruszewski. Polish is Pietruszewski with the roll of the tongue, and it's 5 syllables. But English is just Petru, R-O-O, chef, like a cook.
Pietruszewski.
Yeah, when I graduated with my commission, the captain said Pietruszewski, and I asked him if the person that prepared his meals was a chef.
Well, see, us people down here in the South Buffalo area, predominantly Irish, even though we're also Polish and German, we're not trained how to speak a Polish dialect.
Right.
So we're lucky to say our own names right. You know, most of us are drunk. So no, I'm just kidding.
All the time.
So okay, so we got you established as a former pilot in the U.S. Navy, currently an actor, and you are home right now. You're part of Bill's Mafia, of course.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean, for life. And you're also what there's something else that I'm missing. That I mean, you're very big on current events. You watch everything that's going on, and we kind of had this little dialogue between you and an old friend of mine, and I'll get into who he actually was. But this guy Scott Snelson, his was kind of going back and forth with you on current events. You know, talking about, okay, Russia attacking Ukraine stirs up a lot of dialogue between left and right people, and you and Snelson got into it. Scott Snelson. Snelson was also a grape. He was a former, more below decks. He was working in the filters and the pump rooms.
That shocks me.
He was also, me too. You know, he's a lot more liberal than I would expect over the years. But yes, he is very much an old shipmate of mine. We joked around. We insulted everybody. We were like, kind of like in that realm. And I think we'd be considered bullies now, and we'd probably be canceled if we were.
I think we all would have been. We all did something that would have come back to haunt us.
The military was very different, you know, life for us. So we could, maybe we regret it, maybe we don't, but we've done a lot of things that could be shameful if our mothers found out. Let's just put it that way. And definitely we'd be canceled if we were outed.
100%.
And I just want to let you guys, or let you know, and anybody watching or listening, the other part of me was I bought a video camera, VHS, one of the big bulky JVC video cameras, a year in, and I documented everything that I had done. Every trip we went on, every port we went to, ship life, and I also did little documentary and little music videos. That was kind of like my little skill, is editing, and I'm talking old school VHS tape editing. And that was kind of like where I got my desire to be in the filmmaking. Now, I enjoyed being a personality and talking and as a host and all that. I did radio for a while, but putting together a project to me was just exciting. I get thrills finishing a project, and then here it is. So, so now locally in Buffalo, they have this thing called the 48-hour film project, which is actually an international event. 135 cities around the world compete, and we do this competition where you got to shoot, edit, film, and all that stuff in 48 hours and have it submitted. So I'm part of that community, and we have a great time doing that. We're always competing against each other. And if you are here this summer, they do allow SAG actors just a little waiver that you got
Nice.
to sign.
I hope to be back by then.
Okay.
Dude,
So
I love those 48. Well, first of all, Shawn, let me say this.
yeah.
Buffalo's a big town. Well, it's a big little town, or a little
Hmm.
big town. No, it's a little big town. It's a big
Little
little
big
town.
town.
That's it. Yeah, a little big town. But of the folks that I know who are in the entertainment industry, I mean, as I've come back, and as entertainment became a bigger part of my life, or an equal part of my life with the military, I started engaging back here, and you're one of the first people that I came across. Of course, we have that Navy military connection as well. But
Yep.
dude, you are a baller, and I think you're one of the I think you are one of the people who a lot of folks in Buffalo know your name. They know you're tied to the entertainment industry. You've worked for free. You've worked for low rates. You've worked your way up to union projects, and it's. I wish I had known. I wish I had a Shawn Patrick Greene when I was growing up, that I knew someone in Buffalo who was in, quote, the industry. And I think it's so great for the kids now that can see stuff like this program, because I used to joke, but it wasn't a joke. And I'm so proud of my military service, and everything we did in the military, it shaped us, right?
Yep.
But had I grown up in Tampa, Orlando, LA, New York, Vancouver, New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Orleans, there's so many places in the country, and said to my mom, I want to be an actor like I did in 9th grade, that mom might have said, well, get great grades, respect us, keep your homework done, don't do anything, illegal, and we'll get you into a dramatic high school. But my mom said, no, you're going to go to a real college, get a real degree, and get a real job. And it was just kismet that I ended up down the path, and it crossed back again. I think we joke in the dating world that there's not just one person out there that's right for you. There's several, and it's just when you cross paths, do you cross paths at the right time? And thankfully, I had a second pathway into entertainment, and so did you. But I think it's great that with social media, kids that come up today in Buffalo, they now have the opportunity to pick this as a career path way earlier in life, where they can, get ready and get prepared for it. And I know, Linda Messi, her daughter Capri, and I, and her mom and her husband Joe, we're all friends. And she got a son Dante and another son, I can't remember his name, but I saw them on the set of Cabrini, and I was just at her house a couple of days ago. I had a call back virtually for a national commercial, and she was gracious and let me come into her home, and they shut down the house. I was in the waiting room for 30 minutes, and you could hear a pin drop in that house. The dog was, even quiet, which is a cute little dog, Cosmo. I'm going to make that dog love me if it's the last thing I do. But, kids coming up now, they get to see all this stuff. And it's like, hey, if I work hard, this isn't some distant, unreachable, untouchable dream. And now, because of the way the film commission, those guys down there are, just amazing, have brought so much work in, and we have studios being built. You don't even have to ever really leave Buffalo to have a pretty decent entertainment career. And I think that's just amazing.
Absolutely. Now, you said the Buffalo Film Commission, or Buffalo Niagara Film Commissioners, Tim Clark, right?
Yep.
Tim Clark. So I found out doing my research, Tim Clark is not only the commissioner here in Buffalo for the Film Commission, he is the film commissioner president of the world, or the International Film Commission.
Oh, wow.
It blew my mind. I was like, all these different countries, you got people representing Romania and Argentina.
Right,
He's the president of the International Film Commission.
Wow, that's crazy.
You
Hey, I
wanna
want to
talk
forget, Rich Wall is his assistant, and they
Right.
might even be like co-equals now. They're both awesome guys. I've seen Rich on set every time I've done a film in Buffalo. Rich comes over, he says hi, he knows who I am, which is great to be remembered. But
Yep.
Those two guys probably do the work that would be done by 20 guys in any other city. So I think the film commission's probably a little underfunded here, and
Yep.
we're constantly fighting to keep visibility, and I'm sure those guys were the two biggest forces pushing back against. I don't, if you know his name, don't even say it. But the Rochester state congressman or senator that was trying to kill the film credits, and
Yeah.
and that was never going to happen. And I think that guy knew it was never going to happen. I called his office probably 100 times to tell his staffers, like, your guys just, and it worked. You're just trying to get your guy's name out there. We all know his name, and we all know him as a
Yep.
blankhead now.
Right.
But Buffalo is a growing destination. Tim, Tim and Rich are doing great work, and Fred Olin Ray and Chris Olin Ray have
Yeah,
really
they
put
always
us
come
on
in
the
here.
map.
I've been in quite a few of their projects, and they come in here and they shoot for what, lifetimes. They even had a Netflix release.
Yep.
I've
Yep.
been in a bunch of theirs, and I always see you too on set, whether you're in it or not. You're always around when you're in town. All the sets that are happening. I think I ran into you on Stage Killer. That was the one that was Netflix, and I
Oh,
just
that was the
happened
one
to.
with Chriselle Staus, right?
Chriselle, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I didn't even know who she was. I mean, I am ignorant when it comes to the B lister and under, kind of like I don't know who's who. I don't watch soap operas. I don't watch a lot of content, that's in my sphere of interest. So
right, right.
so I miss out on who's who. And then after the fact, I look it up and I'm like, oh wow, these people do this and this and this. So they were relevant actors. So
Well, I knew her because she was the female lead in the movie that I produced, called Another Time. I
mhm.
think it's on Hulu right now, for free probably, because it's been out for a while. But
You
we had
also
cast.
acted in that too.
I did. I produced
Yeah.
that one, and then I think I had the fourth. It didn't start out that way. I think in the script it was like the sixth largest role, and then when we got into editing, and I had nothing to do with editing, but the editor and the director, as they put it together, the final cut, I was like, I think third or fourth most screen time. So tiny little movie, low budget, really proud of it. But Chriselle came on set for us for that.
hmm
And when I saw that she was in Buffalo, I said hi, and she's like, "Come on down and set and say hi." So that's how I got down there, and I'm good friends with Chris. Chris Olin Ray is also Navy. His
Yep.
father was Navy.
Yep.
I love the synergy of veteran and acting. And I don't
Yeah.
know if you know, but there's a group. I think I told you there's a group based out of LA, but New York and other cities now, called Veterans in Media and Entertainment. So if
hmm
there's anybody out there who's a vet and interested in entertainment, it's vme-connect.com to join. And I was the director of casting for like 8 years, and I worked my butt off, about 30 hours a week for free, to get opportunities for veterans turned actor. Primarily, I help with crew a little bit,
Yep.
to get chances to audition. And we put guys on New Amsterdam out of New York. We put guys on The Punisher out of New York. We put guys on Hawaii Five-0 out of Hawaii. And I'm really proud of some of those castings. And there's a lot of veterans who have turned to industry now, and we're starting to make a nice name for ourselves, and that's awesome.
That's cool. I had a couple people. Somebody's on here just left. I don't know who this is.
Hope it's not my mom. She's probably
Nope.
telling me to pick her up milk.
No. So I have a Twitch comment, but it's not really relevant. I don't know who that was. So, anyways, we're gonna get into the meat of really why you wanted to be on this today. We're gonna discuss that, and so just wanted to get that background first. You know, Navy pilot, veteran, filmmaker, actor, and I've seen a lot of the projects that you've been in, and even I see. I think it was one where you were rating. Um, a president's what was it, like a, trying to think of what was the name of that film you were in, but you were part of
Hmm.
the FBI, I think, rating boxes and stuff like that, and you were like in a snippet of it, and I was like, oh look, that's
Oh,
Alan.
Criminal Minds. I think that was Criminal Minds.
Okay,
Oh
yeah,
no,
maybe
oh
you're
no,
right.
no, 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 no. You're talking about, dude. What's funny, Shawn? You're
Yeah,
talking about the Informant with Matt Damon.
that's it.
And
Yeah, sounds
up
right.
until that time, which was probably 2009, I'd started acting in 2004. So in the first 5 years that I was actually, acting, because so to be clear, for some of the kids that might learn, when I decided to come into the Navy, I mean,
Hmm.
into the acting world, I approached it like a business plan, just like I approached coming into the Navy. So I'm like, I'm going to join the Navy. I got to learn how to swim. I got to get this skill. I got that skill. Then I'm going to be successful in the Navy. I'm going to go into acting. I'm going to get this skill, that skill. So I was still in the Navy. I started studying in 1999. I didn't get out of the Navy till 2004. I didn't join SAG till 2004. So for the first 4 or 5 years that I was, quote, on my industry path, all I did was take classes and do a couple little short films. They were horrible.
That's Yep.
And then once I was
Me too.
eligible to retire, I went to get an agent. I got an agent right away. I booked Cold Case. It was my first job.
Hmm.
And that was 2005. But all the way up to 2009 with The Informant, that was the project that the most people had ever seen me in.
Hmm.
And they're like, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? I'm like, because I wasn't an actor in that movie. I was an extra. So
Sure.
there's a long tracking shot on me, and it was
Yeah.
all me on camera, but I didn't talk. So I'm not saying I'm not proud of it. It was a favor to a friend to go in there and do it. But that wasn't for me. Background work. I don't want to upset anybody in Buffalo. For me, there's professional background and there's professional speaking actors, and you can fleet
Yeah.
from one to the other. But at some point, if you're trying to be a speaking actor, you start leaving the background work behind. So I think that was the last background thing I did until coronavirus hit, and I was
Hmm.
struggling to make my SAG pension credit, $20,000.
Mm.
And then I'm like, listen, the Navy. Well, if growing up in Buffalo and having to shovel snow didn't teach you to be humble and hungry,
Yeah.
being in the Navy did.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't too proud to do background work. So I started doing background work again, and I will do it again this year if I have to make that pension credit. So it's a mix of things now. But you just got to be careful when you're starting out. At some point you can't keep booking out to do background work because your agents will be like, well, are you an actor or are you an extra? Because they want to be able to submit you on stuff. But it's
Sure.
funny that that's the one you remember, because that was really technically background work.
That was awesome, though. Listen, I enjoy doing background work. That's what got me into it. 2009, I did White Irish Drinkers downstate when I was living near New York City, and Central Casting was like the place to be to do all these extra work. So I was busy with that until I moved back here, and I felt like, man, I'm in a desert. There's nothing to do. Until 2013, it seemed to be like it picked up. So I'm happy just to be involved. But I wasn't on a hiatus for 3.5 years because I decided I wanted to finish my bachelor's degree, and so I finally finished that at UB. All
That's
finished.
awesome.
Filmmaking was the production side of things, was the concentration for media study. Plus, I had theater, so it helped me on a couple stage performances that I did. So it helped out. Just every little bit of that just kind of fit in with sound and lighting on both ends, film and theater. So I'm excited that I finished that. I'm happy. My brain is just fried at by the time I finished that. Too old to put all that new information in, but I did it. And now I'm on this track, and who knows what's going to happen next. But I'm excited to be a part again of, at least to start with, the background work. But that's not going to be in my dossier so much. I'm looking in more in producing and directing, and that's kind of the field that I'm interested in. But I like acting. I don't mind it. It's a
When
fun.
when you're on set for any reason, if you're
Sure.
smart, if you're a smart actor, if your background on a film, you can't be bugging the producers and like trying to show them your headshot. But you can
Hmm.
just be sitting there and holding, watching, and
Yeah.
learning so much about how a set works. And
Hmm.
if you're a really professional and they have a line to give, those second ADs and the PAs, they know. They're like, hey, that guy over there, he's been super cool. He's been helpful. I've seen him helping some other people out. He makes
Hmm.
sure that I know. He's tracking anybody who goes to the bathroom and he gets their name. So if they call, he can tell them. They see that stuff. So if you're a professional background actor, or
Hmm.
not a career, but I mean a professional as your background acting,
Sure.
you can both learn a lot and you can make connections.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, it's being on set. You'll learn everything, really, because you're not gonna just watch videos on YouTube or even talk to people who are in the industry. You might learn some things, but being on set is really is the cream of the crop. You learn the ins and outs of every asset that that is used to build this big project or small project. I mean, the last one, which I was a little upset with, I don't know if they have a recut. Coldbrook, we were in the scene together, and I was blurred in the background. they didn't even have your talking line when they first released it on Netflix. And
Yeah, that's
I
that's
was
just something
upset.
that a lot
I
of
was
people
cheering for
don't
you, man.
understand how that can work. I did the biggest role I've had to date as far as lines was an episode of a show on MTV called Awkward. I think I had 30 lines. I was so excited.
Yep.
And then when it was edited, most of my lines were off camera. Well, of course, they were on the hot young lead.
Yeah, of
And that's just
course.
the way it
Yeah.
is. And I tell all my friends coming up in the younger vets who I mentor to for free. I'll always take the call of a veteran in the industry now. And I will always take the call of a Buffalonian. I have a group. It's wholly underutilized. I've never been able to figure out why, but I have a Facebook page called, I think it's Buffalo Actor Mentoring Page, or it might not be Buffalo Actors Helping Actors, but that page is just silent. I mean, I'm not pontificating to people, but if someone asks a question, I absolutely put down what I'm doing and answer. I have a page in LA called Actors Helping Actors 2.0.
Yep.
And then there's pages within the vet group. I'm also now the deputy chair of the SAG LA Military Committee, and I'm advocating for, help for, I call when we've served the service gap. So the way I pitch producers is like, hey, Shawn, to try to help close the service gap, the time that our guys were serving while civilians were advancing in their acting careers, we're trying to accelerate veterans turned actors learning curve. So if I can get you, producer, sound guy, Shawn, to come in and give a 40-minute speech and take some Q&A, that helps veterans turned actor. And that's been really, really successful and rewarding work.
Good. I'd like to be a part of that. I have more liberty to travel, so maybe one of these days I'll get out to one of
Maybe
those
when I get here,
meetings.
we open a Buffalo chapter, bro.
Let's
Of
do it.
VME.
I'll
Yeah.
support it in any way, man. I'll work it with you. So I just want to thank you for not just your service, but your service towards veterans to be in film. And I've seen all that hard work you were talking about. And thank you for that, because the veteran's
Appreciate that.
voice needs to be heard. The veterans, how like a lot of people want to see themselves on camera or whatever, different types of groups, subgroups. A veteran's no different. A veteran wants to see a veteran portrayed in a film in whatever area that they can.
Right.
All right, let's get into the meat. So, Russia attacks Ukraine. And I'm in agreement, and a lot of people might not be, and I understand that. But I'm in agreement with you that we had peacetime under Donald Trump. Now, draft dodger, okay, yeah, he wasn't the guy that wanted to jump on the field. He wanted to go to college, all that kind of stuff, whatever. So, but during his reign as president of the United States, he did have a lot of diplomacy between other countries and the leaders of these countries that were heated and ready to attack. And he kind of came against everybody with some powerful speeches in the United States. And when he got to them, it became a de-escalated conversation. In my opinion, that's what it was perceived to be.
Right.
So now that Biden is in office, a lot of people, left and right, are upset with his leadership, his policies. And this is what they're saying has led up to, some people are saying it was what led up to, this
The invasion
of Russia into Ukraine. And this has kind of been a plan of Putin for a long time, to recreate the Soviet Union, so to speak. He tried it with Georgia when I think Obama was in office, and now
2008.
Right. Yeah.
2008 was Georgia. 2014 was Crimea.
Well, I think it was it the transit, because he was transitioning, because he's no longer going to be president. I think that's when they were attacking Georgia. I don't know. I have to research that again. But you were doing research all last night. You said you're tired.
Yep.
Now it's time to release the beast. What's going on? What is on your mind when it comes to all this going on right now?
Well, first, I just want to backtrack to the whole Trump thing, because for me, we could have a really salient, informative conversation, and never have to use that word, right?
Mhm.
Because there's such polarization and divisiveness in the country today. I mean, greater than ever before. The divisiveness is so great. I'm fearful that we'll never be able to come back to a unified country. But the thing about 2016 to 2020 is I don't want to use. I'm not going to say the four-letter word that would normally. I'll just say blank. But you've heard a phrase like, sometimes you get the blank you need, not the blank you wanted. And we know what the fill in blank. I don't want to say the word because I don't think he is that word.
Mhm.
I posted more negative stuff about him in that 4 years than probably any other conservative or right-leaning person that I know. You know, there was a Medal of Honor ceremony, and he made it all about him, calling people names. Now, not that I don't think Nancy Pelosi deserves to be called some names, but that's not diplomacy. That's not how it works, right?
Right.
We don't bring ourselves together as a people if we call names and we're petty. And if we could have just gotten rid of the pettiness and the name calling and the narcissism and the making it all about me,
Mhm.
right? So that's the biggest difference between that guy and me. You know, I don't care if I get credit for some of the work that I've done with veterans, but if a veteran gets cast, that fills me with joy, right? So I only care about the end result. So
Right.
if you look at, so now let's talk about some specifics, because again, it's not necessarily about left and right, but if you look at a graphic of the last 8 presidents of the United States, and now you
Mhm.
could say 9, but that graphic has to be updated. And so you put their faces on the left, and then on the right, all the military engagements, because they're not always called wars, that they were involved in or led us into or brought us out of.
Mhm.
There's only one that's a blank white sheet of paper, and that was the guy that was in the office from 2016 to 2020. Now, why were there no new military engagements? Well, first and foremost, that guy did not believe that there were many things, many causes, many conflicts that were worth risking American blood over, right? And to be clear, Ukraine is also not worth risking American blood over. We'll get deeper
Mhm.
into that if we have time.
Yeah, we do. We
So,
have
so,
plenty of
so,
time.
so he wouldn't commit troops unless it was like something that just was unavoidable, and we never got to anything that was unavoidable. The second thing that was different about him was he didn't have 48 years in office like Joe Biden, you know. And I'll tell you, like for Scott Snelson, who I am shocked to learn that he is a veteran. I wish I'd known, because I would have approached him slightly different in the thread, you know. And now that we're sitting here in calm and I've had, you know, 4 hours of sleep, you know, I'd want to go back and delete all my comments on your Facebook thread there. So if anybody wants to see the harsh crap that I said, you better go get it now, because when this wraps up, I'm going to go delete it. But when I'm shocked that Scott is a veteran, because at one point he said, "Oh, so you were in the military and you supported Trump," and he was hung up on the word support. You know, I'm like, look, I had a choice between Trump and Hillary, and we can forget about all the Russia collusion cases. Listen, I'm really intellectually informed to talk about the Mueller case, the Durham case, but you know, unless we have 4 hours, we're not going to get to that. But I'll say this: what happens on the left happens on the right, you know. And there are some people that only believe the stuff on their side. I believe the stuff on both sides, but I know there's nuances and different layers to it. But when Scott Snelson said, "Oh, you were in the military and you supported Trump," in other words, you were in the military and you're a conservative, it shows a great lack of understanding of this country. You know, we're 330 million people, and about 150 million each are left and right. And then there's, you know, some libertarians and independents and some folks that are political atheists. That's a term I probably just made up, but they just don't give a shit. Sorry, I'll try not to swear again. They just don't give a crap about politics. You know, I can't tell you how many people in the last couple of months have said, Alan, even one of my best friends, Ian Whitcomb, yesterday texted me and he goes, because my stock account was crashing and I was freaking out. He's like, just let it go. Just stop, turn off the TV. You can't affect that. People are saying, just go live your life. My sister moved from Binghamton down to Tennessee. You know, they're a little bit older than me. Sorry, Val. And they're like, you know, we're just going to enjoy what we have left here. And I'm slowly getting to that point where I'm going to say, I'm going to take the money I've saved and just go live in a safe place until, because the divisiveness is really killing me. But then something like this happens and I find myself being pulled back into it. So for the Scott Snelsons out there, the military is, and Shawn, you know this, the military is just a subset of society. So that when people say things like, well, we're going to send you to the military to straighten you out. That's just utter nonsense. If you're a dirtball in the civilian world, you're likely going to be a dirtball in the military. There are always a few exceptions that guys actually turn themselves around. But for the most part, a dirtball is going to stay a dirtball. And a guy who has basic good moral and ethical bones is going to carry that structure into the military, into entertainment, into whatever vocational ventures he goes into, right? So for Scott, yes, Scott, I lean conservative. Given a choice between Trump and Hillary, I chose, it's not even the monster that I knew. I chose the monster who didn't seem to care about all the other monsters. He knew he hadn't been in politics for 48 years and accomplished nothing. I would challenge Scott offline to send us a list of all the accomplishments that he's so proud of that Joe did in his 48 years in the Senate, representing Delaware, right? But so now to try to stay focused on Russia, to even understand what's happening in Russia, you can't think like an American, because Americans have had freedom their entire lives. They have this expectation of freedom. And aside from the fact that what just happened in Canada could very well happen here in DC with these convoys when they're arriving, and make no mistake about it, when a free democratic country like Canada takes a single mom who donated $50 to a GoFundMe campaign because she thought that as far as what she knew, it was just a bunch of guys in trucks who were setting up bouncy houses for kids and portable soft-sided hot tubs and singing "Oh Canada." She didn't know that they were, quote, all white racist. Even the black people are white in the group. The black truckers are white adjacent racist because Castro's son, if you didn't know that, Trudeau, designated that they're all terrorists. So this is the thing I hate about the left most. We like to use wordology and definitions and changing definitions in the case of vaccine and vaccinated and gain of function on the CDC's website. So we'll if you accuse me of doing gain of function research and I read the definition and I think that you're probably right, I just change the definition. And the next time I come up before Congress, I say, well, Senator, according to the current definition on the CDC website of gain of function, we are not doing gain of function research. That's great. But if I come to your house and stab you in the chest, and then later I try to go on Wikipedia and change the definition of stabbing, it doesn't change the fact that you're lying on the ground in a bloody mess and there's a knife in your chest with my fingerprints on it, right? So I'm not big on wordology and definition changing. But the first place you have to start from is we have freedom. At least we do right now. What happened in Canada has really scared the living bejesus out of me. But assuming that doesn't happen here, we have freedom. So an American approaches Vladimir Putin and the people of Russia and says, well, you just give him what he wants and he'll go away. You have to think like a Vladimir Putin. And it's not like an elusive thing to understand Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin put out a 9-page, no kidding, Unabomber level manifesto a year ago. And if you read even the summary of that, it was very easy to predict what was coming. But some people want to discount stuff and say, well, that, maybe those are just words, or maybe they'll change. No. So let's just talk about first, why is Putin there? Why was he threatening Ukraine? Well, after the World War II, because a lot of the kids 35 and under don't know what the USSR was. They don't know what the Soviet Union was. They've only known of the country Slovakia. And they didn't know that it was Czechoslovakia, that the Russians put two countries together. They've only known of Moldova and Macedonia and Kosovo and Albania. They didn't know that when Russia took over most of the Eastern Bloc countries, there were 30 countries that comprised the Eastern Bloc, that in addition to Russia comprised the Soviet Union, that comprised the Iron Curtain, that comprised the United Socialist Soviet Republic, the USSR. When Russia came in, they were like, Albania is the size of Vermont, Kosovo is the size of Massachusetts. They're like, this is way too much work. Let's just mash a bunch of these countries together. We'll wrap them up with the string of oppression and a lack of human rights, and they will all be now known as Yugoslavians. Study just that when you get 5 minutes on Wikipedia, and you'll learn wow, these guys came in, I'm saying like too many times, like a 20-year-old, but they came in and they said, we don't want to have to legislate and take care of 7 different countries. Let's make it one. So later, fast forward to mid 80s, when the Iron Curtain starts to fall apart, the first thing that happened when Yugoslavia, which was a fake country, was given its independence, was civil war immediately. So when Kamala Harris was over at the German Security Summit a couple days ago, and I would love to read a quote that she gave there.
Sure.
One of the things that she said was, we've had peace in Europe for 70 years. Well, that's not right, Madam Vice President. We had a war in Kosovo, and it was a civil war that comprised of at least 7 countries. Don't quote me on how many countries made up the fake country of Yugoslavia. But as soon as you took away the dictatorship glue, those countries were all like, no, I'm Albanian. I'm not Yugoslavian, and we're gonna have Albanian nationality. Yugoslavian nationality was a fiction. It was a fake word. There's no such thing. And on a micro scale or a smaller scale, the same thing goes in Iraq. Saddam Hussein had Shia, Muslim, Sunni, Shia, and I forget the guys that were in the Northern Alliance, but there were 3 or 4 different religiously affiliated groups, and they only behaved because if you didn't, a dictator was going to take away your freedom, right? So when Saddam was deposed, now it turned into a civil war. That's always going to happen, and we shouldn't have been there either. So to bring it back to Russia now, in his manifesto, he said the biggest travesty that ever happened to the Russian people was losing their empire. Gorbachev, let the empire break apart, let the Soviet Union break apart. You remember Reagan's words, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And I am Polish. I am goddamn proud to be Polish. And Poland was at the heart of the teardown of the Soviet Union. So what happened was, at the height of the Soviet Union, as we approached the late 70s, 78, 79, 80.
I'm showing real quick the kingdom of Yugoslavia. There's looks like 9 countries.
1, 2. Yeah, that's crazy. And you just random up. I love the word kingdom. You random up into one clump. That's almost like, in a way, it's not. Man, this just popped in my head. This is a great analogy because today there's a great movement. Great isn't big, not isn't awesome. There's a great movement towards finding certain words bad. America, Americanism, patriotism, patriot, the national anthem, the flag. All these things by part of the country are now considered like dirty.
Yeah.
And you have to understand why. It's because they want to turn the country socialist. And you can't do that until you take the symbols like the founding fathers and the Constitution and you make them dirty and unsupportable or unlikable. And then we can finally, you can't take another dump in the toilet until you flush the first one, right? So they're trying to flush the toilet and then start over with a clean bowl of water. Okay. So in the context of that dichotomy in our country, you could say that the same thing happened in America as the country was founded. You had 13 individual colonies, and some of them were totally against slavery, and some of them had totally embraced slavery. So think of the beginning, the first genesis of America, the 13 colonies, as Yugoslavia, right? So America was Yugoslavia, but we had disparate parts. So when people want to call America a slavist nation and a country born on slavery, like, I will fight you, like, out in the parking lot, just 2 of us, not a gang up. I won't pick on somebody smaller than me, but I'm happy to fight somebody bigger than me and put my military skills to test. Okay. But I will call you out on that, and I will fight you, because our country is the grandest, most eloquent, most free country this world has ever seen.
It's true.
When we formed in 1776, there were 2 different things going on. There was King George and his oppression, and then there was half the country, half the colonies didn't like slavery. So when we decided to, hey, let's group together. Now we grouped together voluntarily, where Yugoslavia was forced. So the glue that held Yugoslavia together, the glue that held Iran together, was oppression, was dictatorship, was people disappearing. The glue that held America together was a desire for freedom and to have basic human rights bestowed upon us by God, not by a king or a president or some kind of a congressional body or a legislative body, right? So as we tried to form, the founding fathers, the first objective they had to overcome was, hey guys, we don't want slavery. Well, we do want slavery, but we don't, but we do. Okay, well, can 6 colonies overcome King George? Probably not. So they kicked the can down the road. They said, we'll form now. We'll get rid of King George and the oppression. We'll form the greatest, freest country the world ever seen. And the guys in the North were like, we'll get to slavery as soon as we can. And it wasn't that long. I think the Western Proclamation Act was, I think it's actually called the Western Proclamation Act of 1783, but it's somewhere between 83 and 89. And the founding fathers were genius, not quite as genius as Fourier, who invented Fourier transforms in the engineering world, where I have a master's degree in electrical engineering. And that guy, he was like the Elon Musk of his time. He found ways to do math that were easier than what we had in the time domain. And Fourier transforms converted data into the frequency domain where they were easier to solve. And then you converted it back into the time. Man, I don't even know what I just said right now because I've forgotten so much. But the founding fathers, they started to lay out the mechanisms for how new states would be created. So all the different colonies had their own claims on Western lands, and many of them overlapped. So they said, listen, if we're going to be a country, the first thing we got to do, we got to give up all our Western claims to the Congress. And then the founding fathers laid out a plan. It was like a certain amount. And so if you look at Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, if you look at all those countries, while their shapes are different as determined by mountain ranges and rivers primarily, the overall square acreage is about roughly the same. Until you get way out west, and then they're like, there's so few people. What was the key mechanism to becoming a state back then, or it was a territory? You could form and become a new state when you had 60,000 adult male-aged voters. Then you could apply to become a state from being a territory. And as you got further and further west, to get 60,000, it took more and more land. You were never going to get a Montana the third of the size of Montana because it's open range and mountains and plateaus and plains and all that. So there was only one caveat. This is somewhere between 83 and 89. I'm embarrassed I can't give you the exact number, but I think it was 89 or maybe 83, whatever. Let's move on, Alan. There was one caveat. Do you know what that caveat was?
Couldn't tell you.
Slavery is prohibited. There was no other rules. You can become a state with 60 adult age voting males, and slavery was prohibited. So any blanker who wants to accuse this country of being born of slavery can blank my blank. Okay? I think I'm being really good about the use of blank right now. So we tried to negotiate. So now you can think of the South as a little bit like Vladimir Putin. We in the North were like, slavery's wrong. It's so clearly wrong. And we in America say, communism is wrong. But then you have Putin saying, well, communism works. And you know who just recently gave a speech admiring communism? Justin Trudeau. He literally said on the floor of Parliament, or maybe it was in a TV interview. I don't want to get quoted. I don't want somebody out there to find the one inaccurate thing that I say, and that's all they'll post about on Facebook later. Right?
Hey, whatever keeps it active, whatever.
Exactly. So Trudeau gave a speech and he said, I admire China and their communist way because they've been able to adapt more rapidly than any other country to coronavirus. Well, yeah, if you put a gun to somebody's head and say, put that mask on or I'm going to shoot you, you're going to be more effective than what's happened in America.
Yep.
Right. And so now you have somebody who said, I admire Putin's strategic planning and execution of that plan. And so now, driven by MSNBC and the mainstream media, all kinds of people are glomming on that Trump said he admires Putin over this. They don't want to talk about Biden and Harris's, utter failures in foreign policy. They want to talk about Trump said he admires Putin. You know what? I'm going to go on the record right now. I'm going to go on the record right now and say, I admire Putin's execution and planning from the military strategy standpoint, because it was almost flawless.
Yeah,
Now, I
no, it
don't think
was.
he's planned for the long-term guerrilla war, and I think he'll lose in the long term. But so the people that want to critique America and slavery, all new states were not allowed to have slaves. We got rid of it as soon as we could. We tried to be patient with those communist Confederates, because I made that analogy. And when we finally said enough of the communism Confederacy, now we're going to fight. And we had a civil war led by a Republican president, and people who didn't own slaves gave up their children. I mean, they died to set slaves in the free that they didn't know, to set them free. So when people are talking about reparations and white racist and just being, the definition of racism is the color of our skin now, and critical race theory, I say to them, like I say to my mom, she's like, you know, did you think I wanted that short towel for my bath last night? And I measure it against the other towels. They all look exactly the same. It's 3 inches shorter. I'm like, Mom, you could have said, hey, honey, can you take that shorter towel and put it on the guest towel shelf? I'm like, please don't always lead from a place of negativity. I don't remember BLM or any African American advocacy groups saying, hey, we want to go on record as thanking the North for giving up their white children to set our black great children into freedom. We only concentrate on the negative. And so I would encourage the people in America who are just to the left and just to the right of center, because those are the people who will now determine the future of this country. The far leftist and the far rightist, like me, you will never convince me to be a liberal Democrat. It's just never going to happen. I will argue you on any point. I will debate any Democrat on any platform. You set any rules. You can mute me if I swear. If I swear once or raise my voice, I forfeit the conversation. I will go on TV and say I lost. I won't say I forfeited. I'll say I lost. In any forum, in any place, at any time, I will debate anybody. The problem is, well, the fact is nobody's ever taken me up on it. And Scott Snelson declined. Instead of coming on your show with me and you, he opted to just sling more insults and attack the fact that I voted for Trump, not addressing that my other choice was Hillary, and they were both bad choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at Russia, think of the genesis of this country, think of the Civil War, and you weren't thinking like a Southern slave owner who was thinking, if I give up my slaves, I'm going to lose my wealth. My children aren't going to be able, whatever. And I don't agree with any of that stuff, but I was able to think like them to understand it. So now, in order to figure out what Putin's doing, and more importantly, for the 5 or 6 people that are pulling Biden's puppet strings, to be able to think like Putin is the only way that you can understand Putin and try to put mechanisms and policies and sanctions in place that will actually have some effect. The goal is to not have to put boots on the ground over there. And if we do that, whoever's in, I don't care if it's Trump for his 10th term, because they decided to end that part of the law. Please don't ever do that. 2 terms is enough of anybody. I wish there were 2 terms on senators serving, honestly.
Yeah, they're moving towards that eventually, but we'll see.
I hope, and campaign and finance reform. But you can't understand what's happening. You can't even begin to formulate an understanding of what's happening unless you think like Putin. So let's just lay out a couple things of how Putin thinks. Putin, from his manifesto, said the biggest mistake ever made in Russia was Gorbachev giving up the Soviet Union. Okay, that's like Tennessee saying the biggest mistake in this country was giving up slavery. So if somebody says that, you can assume that maybe they want slavery back, and that would be a warning bell. Well, if somebody wrote that in America a year ago, as soon as Biden took office, I can guarantee you a couple things would have happened. That dude would have been designated a domestic terrorist just for saying the words. He would have been designated a domestic terrorist, like that single mom in Canada who donated $50 on the GoFundMe to the Canadian truckers. They've frozen her bank accounts because she donated to what they designated a terrorist group. She is now designated a terrorist. She's lost her job. She has no way to support her family. And anybody in this country who thinks that is okay, I would argue does not deserve the freedom that they have, because they don't understand where it came from, what it costs to maintain it, and what it is supposed to be a two-way street, what you give to get. Right?
You know what? The one thing I observe on some people is that they're comfortable being oppressed, or at least under control, so to speak, because it gives them, it kind of releases them of trying. in my
And
opinion.
the
Like
responsibility.
responsibility, their ability to think for themselves and make decisions. Some people are not good decision makers. Some people don't
Right.
want to make a decision,
Correct.
and I'm not trying to be, belittle women here, but let's just say you
Please
take your
don't do
woman
that.
out, you take your woman out, one of the things that it's like, okay, what do you want to eat? We've been to this restaurant 50 times, okay, and you don't know what they have on the menu. To me, that's kind of, you know, being indecisive. And I'm not trying to say that's all women. Some men do that too. But some people like others to make decisions for them. And this is why most people are passionate about even politics, voting for the person to speak for them instead of, like I applaud the Black Lives Matter folks who believe in what they what they were protesting for, because they came out of their houses and they did something about it. Person that doesn't believe in something, that stays in their house and doesn't want to protest about it, doesn't matter. The truckers, I applaud the truckers for going out to doing what they believe in. You know what I mean? They're protesting something that they're passionate about. They came out of their houses though to do it.
Right.
The people that want to stay home and watch, you know,
The Real
PMSNBC or
Housewives of.
whatever, yeah, they want to watch the news to make the decisions for them.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great point.
You
Yeah,
know,
and Shawn, you know what? You know what? Think about that's such a great point because um, you have to understand that not every country in the world will fit the American model. And one of those countries was Iraq. Iraq worked great. I mean, look, genociding is never good. I don't want to say that I supported any of that, but you could make a very valid, logical based argument that the people of Iraq were better off under the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein. Because once Saddam Hussein was gone, you had roving bands, black marketers, and that model doesn't work everywhere. So a lot of the people would have said, hey, I wish we could have that dictator back. Because what did they get? They got 15, 20 years of bloodshed, and that's on their land. Which bloodshed on their land, to them the solution is, let's have a dictator back. I don't want to have to make these decisions. I don't want to have to send my kids out to get slaughtered by the roving bands of Al Qaeda and ISIS and all that. But that is a great analogy. Again, we bring it back to Russia now. So would the people of Russia want freedom? I'm not sure that the people of Russia even totally understand what freedom is. But the ones who make the effort tell me that there's a promise there. 2 nights ago, 137 protesters were in Moscow, anti-war protesting, and the next day, 137 people were checked into the gulag. And I told my manager last night on the phone. I spoke out of hat. I was guessing, and I said it like fact, and I had to text him later to tell him I was wrong. I said, and you know how many were protesting tonight? 0. But I was wrong. There were thousands out last night. And that's largely due to illegal access to the internet and people sharing on encrypted programs like WhatsApp. But the word's getting out, and there are a lot of people in Russia, in Moscow today, who are embarrassed that they're beating up on their neighbor. Nobody believes the false narrative that Putin has put out 2 5-letter names that I keep interchanging. It's a slip of the tongue. It's not intentional. But Putin, has this no protest, thing that he goes. So those people end up in jail, and they'll get around to that. But right now, they've got something more important on their hands over in Ukraine. So let's go back to how we knew this was coming. In the manifesto, I want to read. He basically said, "I want my legacy to be the premier of Russia who reconstituted the empire." So for people who don't know what those words mean, he's talking about the 30 countries that made up the Soviet bloc. Anybody under 35 doesn't know.
He wants to be the next Alexander the Great for Russia, is the bottom line.
Right. And for people who don't know,
we have all these conquerors all over history from many countries. And, a lot of history is written from Europe and Asia. And we don't know a lot about the African continent, how that formed and all that, because a lot of documentary things. But Alexander the Great has been hailed as one of the best conquerors in all of Europe and the Middle East. in history, and every one of these dictators from any country that you can name that came up all have this guy in their mind as well. Trust me. Now, maybe Stalin isn't also a person that he wants to be like in his country, but ultimately Alexander the Great was the best conqueror, you know, in all of history. Now we have, we can argue Italian and all that stuff with the Caesars and all that, but it was one
Yeah.
guy that did the whole thing, and he was on the front lines conquering. He wasn't at his palace. He was on the front line. So Putin in my opinion, he's a coward. He's not going to be on
Well,
the front lines of
and
anything.
he's not the same. Like I like your Alexander the Great analogy. Just understand that Alexander the Great was a true conqueror. The
Right.
reason that that Russia, and people need to understand, history is so important, not just because it repeats itself, but because it informs us on current events, right?
Right.
So Russia is the largest landmass country in the world. It's really, it gives you a creepy goosebump perspective to get on a globe and just get on a globe and trace out Russia, and then move it around to the rest of the globe. Russia is like 4 times bigger than China, and
Yeah.
China's as big as, maybe a little bigger than the United States. It's crazy. But Russia was tired after World War II. They'd had World War I, they had World War II, and for us Polish folks, there's hundreds of years of history of Russia, Prussia, Germany, and Poland, or it might be Austria before Germany, are fighting with each other. And the
Mhm.
Poles were some of the most fierce, ferocious fighters out there. So in the 1700s, Prussia, Russia, and Austria, I might have the countries wrong again. There's so much data running around up here. They
Mhm.
got together and said, "Hey, those cockroaches in Poland, they're always getting up our schnizzle." Still only swore once so far. Very proud of that.
You're
And
doing very well.
why don't we cut Poland in half, and we'll split half 3 ways, and they can keep the other half. And Catherine the Great was the Tsar of Russia, and she didn't want to do that, but she was a female, a rarity in leadership in that time, and in that century, and she went along with it because otherwise they were going to keep all the land themselves. That was in like 1735 or something. And then like in the late 1780s, they did that's called the 3 partitions of Poland. They cut Poland in half again, and then the third time they're just like, man, these cockroaches. I'm almost saying a different word when I start that word, so I got to be careful. These cockroaches just won't go away, and they completely eliminated Poland in like 1789. And Poland was gone for 118 years, no Poland,
Hmm.
until
Wow.
another conqueror, um, the French short guy, Napoleon, came in,
Hmm.
right? So then in 1939, Russia and Germany had the Molotov-Ribbentrop non-aggression pact. By the way, Germany had attacked every nation after they had a non-aggression pact. They subsequently attacked every one of those nations. So Russia probably knew it was coming, but they made a non-aggression pact, and there were several paragraphs in that pact, and the last one was not published. It was super secret, and it was, in September, we will invade Poland from the east and west, split them in half, and there's no more Poland. For all of World War II, there was no Poland. So I'm very invested in this whole thing that's going on now, because when Putin gets done with Ukraine, he's going next to one of 2 places. Either Poland, which has been central in all of these empire buildings, or to the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And those 3 should be more worried, because the false flag, false logic that Putin, that Biden gave for invading Ukraine was, I feel threatened that NATO might admit a country directly on my physical border into NATO. I don't want NATO on my border. It's not, it's partially true, but it's not wholly true, because if it was wholly true, he'd already be freaking the F out about Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But because those countries share a physical border with Russia, they should be very afraid, like terrified right now. We, the free world, should be arming those countries to the teeth with javelin missiles and heat-seeking ground, Stinger missiles, and we should make it so that Russia will know there was such a physical and blood cost to going into those countries. Putin wanted us to say that Ukraine wouldn't be admitted into NATO. Could we have done that? We could have. Should we have done that? I don't know. But why didn't we? I don't know. Maybe Biden was trying to show us a short, fleeting moment of strength in the world as foreign policy. It's possible that even if we had stated we would not make Ukraine a NATO member, that Putin would have gone in anyway. Maybe not this year, maybe next year, maybe next decade. But ultimately, his goal was to reconstitute the empire. And that has to inform everything that you think and feel and say about what's going on over in Eastern Europe right now. So he gets Ukraine. And was his intention to take the whole country right now? Who can say? I'm not in that guy's brain. I personally believe that he intended to take just the 3 cities that I can't remember the name, because those the way they spell letters or spell words are a little bit hard to pronounce, but it's Donbass is one of them. Then there's 2 others in the Donbass region. They call it the breakaway region. Putin refers to it as the Russian dominated part of Ukraine. So when people start thinking, so there's these 3 cities down there.
Those are, that area is considered the Russian, the Ukrainian Russian loyalists.
Right. The separatists, the loyalists. Again,
right.
Remember, we changed the definitions of vaccinated from, or vaccine from, a solution that when injected into the body prevents, excuse me, one from getting the disease. Mm-hmm. And when Fauci got slammed in Congress for the leaky vaccine, because even when you had it, you could still get the disease, they went in, they changed the definition to a solution that when injected into the body helps prevent against getting the disease. Mm-hmm. So the vaccine was falling short of the established definition, so they changed the definition to accommodate the leaky vaccine. Okay, so now you got to go back to Russia and say, so Putin is saying that's the separatist region. That's the breakaway region. Putin is like a Democrat. He's like a leftist. He's like a liberal. He thinks that terminology and wordology can support world opinion and his country's opinion domestically. Mm-hmm. So, but I want to make an analogy that Americans can relate to, a real world analogy that you and I lived, because we lived in California. So imagine now that enough illegal immigrant criminals, that is a term that I have put together. The left hates illegal, they hate the word illegal alien. But by definition, if you come into the country illegally, you've broken a law. If you break a law, you're a criminal. So I am coining right here live, illegal alien criminals. If enough illegal alien criminals come into the country from south of the border, maybe not Mexican, but Spanish speaking, that we will then have a majority Spanish speaking in a region. So let's not even take California. Let's say San Diego County. If we had a breakaway region in, say, La Jolla, a city maybe nobody's ever heard of, and all of a sudden they have the majority of the people. It's the majority is Mexican speaking. And now the president of Mexico gets on TV and says, well, the Mexican speaking, the separatist region in San Diego County, breakaway region, I am concerned that the California National Guard has been firing on them. First of all, they weren't. Nobody from Ukraine was firing on those areas. It was all false flag, all false information, all false justification to send in Russian troops.
Yeah, I saw a lot of footage from the areas that they claimed were attacked by Ukrainians, and to me, there's no evidence. This is just what the news will report, and you can't take. I'm telling you, listen, people, don't take the news as evidence, because it's not. I've seen. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll kind of interrupt for a second though.
No, it's fine.
I'm watching this footage of an area being attacked, okay, by ground troops, okay, and this reporter dressed with his, and I think this might be Al Qaeda, but he was dressed with, or no, it was NBC. He was dressed in a bulletproof vest, had a helmet on, and he's walking around. This is the area that a bomb dropped. Okay, and then these people are like, within an hour later, these people are pretending that they're fighting a ground attack. Okay, the people look so disorganized that were in this scene. I'm telling you, you've been in Hollywood, you've been on sets, you've seen scenes of action. This is exactly what CNN type setup it was. That's what it felt like. It might have even been CNN. I don't remember. Maybe it was. But when I watch CNN, I know that there are actors, there are people that participate that they say, "Hey, you want $50 real quick? Do this scene for me." People don't even look like they were naturally involved in a ground attack there.
Yeah.
And this reporter was just walking around freely like nothing's happening. He was just like, "Oh, I'm protected. It's okay." That guy would have been shot instantly if he was on a real ground attack. So
Sean, you and I could
I don't
grab
buy it.
only the gear that you have
Yeah.
and a fake police uniform, which would be very convincing looking, and we could go right outside my sister's house here, and we could make a fake story of a police officer beating the crap out of some guy who was just walking down the street delivering newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And unless somebody critically analyzed the footage, you could get trending on Twitter that a Buffalo police officer unprovoked beat the crap out of a citizen. So you have to question everything.
I do.
But back to the San Diego analogy. So
Sure,
for Americans that are looking at Russia, imagine that the president of Mexico goes on TV and says, "I am recognizing as an independent territory San Diego County. I am sending peacekeepers in to protect the Mexican-speaking people." Or Canada doing it to North Dakota. This is a sovereign nation, and just recognizing them as an independent territory is a grotesque violation of long established and respected international law. So that makes Putin a criminal. He's a world criminal, and at that point, anything you say is already somewhat suspect, right? So they use that as the excuse. Now, I believe that Putin only knew for sure that he was going to occupy permanently that eastern region just north of Crimea. But I think it's important to back up a little bit. So when's the last time Putin invaded Ukraine? Don't answer. If you went on the street and asked 100 Buffalonians, when is the last time Ukraine was invaded by Russia? There's a serious possibility that a lot of people, maybe everybody, would say never. I know that he invaded Crimea, but I don't think he invaded Ukraine recently. Well, that's like saying that he invaded San Diego County, but he didn't invade the United States. Most Americans don't know foreign geography. And all, there's so many new countries that have established on the globe. I have to tell you honestly, when I heard in 2014 under President Obama that Russia had gone into Crimea, the only time I had ever heard the word Crimea ever before was that there was a post-Germany surrender conference in the Crimea between Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill to discuss how they were going to go after and prosecute the remaining war on Japan. I didn't even know that Crimea was part of the Ukraine, and I'm a pretty proud history person. I studied political science at Canisius College, and history is a lot of political science, right? So Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014. He took over a peninsula area called the Crimea that sticks out into the Black Sea, and he kept it. That's like Mexico coming into San Diego County and keeping all of San Diego County, or coming into Arizona and keeping the entire state of Arizona, and he never left. Now, let's just say hypothetically that Mexico invades Arizona and they take the whole state. Will we allow them to hold the state? No, we would fight back. Why didn't Ukraine fight back in Crimea? Because I don't want to insult any little people. And I'm not going to use the word that is insulting. I'll just say little people. But Ukraine is a little person to Russia's like 7 foot, who was the Chinese, Yao Ming. So Russia is like the Yao Ming sized basketball player, and Ukraine is the little person. And Yao Ming is accusing the little person of shelling their people, of threatening the sovereign territory of where the giant lives. It's laughable. Anybody who believes that in America really needs to take a history class. So you got the little guy saying, "Look, please don't hurt me. I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to discuss not becoming a NATO member. I'm willing to discuss having a non-aggression pact with Russia. I'm willing to discuss, ceding over permanently Crimea or even the breakaway regions. Like, everything's on the table. This is a people that were oppressed for 50 years as part of the Iron Curtain. They just want their freedom and their autonomy to determine their own future. That's all they want. Now, before we go any further, I don't think that Ukraine is a great country. I don't think it's on the top 10 list of democracies in the world. But they don't deserve to be bullied
It's a
by the
democracy
great Russian bear.
nonetheless.
Yeah. They're far from being a democracy, right? But with the right, we could have used the carrot of NATO membership as a way to nudge them in that direction. NATO's not an offensive group, so Ukraine is like NATO. NATO's never going to initiate a war, and Ukraine's not going to ever initiate a war against Russia. You don't see Ukrainians launching airstrikes on Russia. I don't think they'd be very effective, but they have aircraft, and they know how to use them. So in World War II, after America suffered the devastating blow of Pearl Harbor, we felt it was really important to put bombs on target in Japan. And so it was up to General Doolittle, who was an Army general, and he came up with this great idea. Let's clear all the aircraft off a small aircraft carrier. Well, it was a big one then. We'll put some We'll put some American Army bombers on that aircraft carrier deck. We'll get as close as we can to Japan, and we'll drop some bombs. Was any significant damage done? No. But the moral victory to the American people of having struck at the heart of Japan was everything. You had people volunteering, mothers and daughters volunteering to build aircraft in the factories, and eventually we built more aircraft carriers, and in the end, we kicked their butt. Like we will do against anybody, given enough time and enough unity, something that this country is wholly lacking right now. The Ukrainian army and air force could easily try to get a missile or a bomber or fighter attack on the Kremlin. And that would be a huge bolster to the mental state and the fervency of the fighting ethic of the people on the ground in Ukraine. But the Ukraine doesn't want to attack Russia. They don't want to be aggressor. They just want to live free and determine their own future. That's all they want. So everything Putin's doing is a false flag operation. Why did he go further than the breakaway regions? I don't believe it was planned. I think it's because the American response was so pathetic, and Putin is so drunk with power that he's like, we've got the people here. It's a lot of money and time to get almost 200,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. I only ever thought I would get this. In fact, you could make an argument that he wanted to be really, really strong in the way he communicate with strength, right? The words matter, the posture matters, the venue matters, the sentiment matters. He maybe put all those troops around Ukraine because he simply wanted a written document that NATO would never allow Ukraine to join NATO. We don't know, but that may be all he wanted. And then as he got close and the response is pathetic, he's like, you know what, let's send troops in and see what happens. We sent in peacekeepers. What happened? Nothing. Strong words. And the threat of sanctions. And anybody who says something today or post into your feed on the social media about this interview, they should be prepared that I will do 200 hours of research to prove you wrong. So don't try to say that the Ukrainian people instigated this, or that Biden and Harris didn't say something that they did say. They both absolutely said that they thought sanctions could prevent this from happening. And then yesterday, the president got on TV, might have been the day before, it's lack of sleep, it's all running together. He said in his speech, it was yesterday, he said, I never said that sanctions would prevent this from happening. We have the greatest flip-flopper of all time. And you know who is paying attention to that? Vladimir Putin is paying attention to that. When he did his manifesto a year ago, we didn't come out and say, and we should have come out and said, hey, we've read the manifesto. Like, CNN reporter could have asked Biden, hey, did you read the manifesto? Well, no, I didn't. Those are really big words for me. But my guys gave me a summary, and I want Vladimir to know that if he ever moves against a former Soviet bloc nation, on day one that he moves troops to the border, we will immediately kick him out of the SWIFT banking system or something solid, like something not tentative, but something you could put your finger on. Maybe the SWIFT banking system wasn't the right first move, but to say now that we thought these sanctions would not prevent the incursion, and now we all agree, because wordology and democratic definitions, we were saying, well, an incursion might not elicit a response, but so now it's an invasion. We all agree it's an invasion. Now they're saying, we never thought the invasion would be prevented by sanctions. Go back and look it up. And when you do your search on the internet, please, as a personal favor to me, any actor that looks at both search engines, I'll give you a half-hour free consultation on anything you want about acting. You cannot just search on Google. You have to go to DuckDuckGo or a browser I just learned about called Brave. A guy I know, or a guy I listened to an interview on, said that since he downloaded the Brave browser, he hasn't gotten a single targeted ad because they don't collect any personal data from him. There's a reason why when you search on your iPhone for turtle statues, the next time you log into Facebook, you get turtle statue ads. It's targeted ads because they mine your information. On Facebook, when it's free, you are the product, and that should concern you. On Brave, he's not getting targeted ads. A couple of weeks ago, this is ancillary related, so indulge me for a second. A couple of weeks ago, a 37-year-old white male, husband of a former Miss Mississippi, was murdered in Maxwell, Alabama, in front of his 2-year-old child. Because of the child, it's a crime with special circumstances, and the shooter will be possibly get the death penalty. When I heard that news, not because I'm a racist or white racist adjacent or any other kind of adjacent or any other kind of racism, but because of everything that's happened in this country since the BLM summer riots of 2020, the first thought that crossed into my mind was the shooter black or white? Now, many African-American people may right away conclude that I'm a racist, and I'm happy to come on the show and focus in on racism and debate that. But I went to Google, and I Googled this search string. Is murder suspect Jeremiah Walker black?
I think you froze. Give me 1 second, Alan.
Oops, I see spinning. Okay. The third hit was a hit about a black man who had been killed 2 years ago. It has nothing to do with what happened 3 days prior, because that's the way Google rack and stack their responses. They filter, censor out things that make the left look bad, or things that might drive an independent thinker to form an opinion one way or the other. So then I went to DuckDuckGo, and I put in, is murder suspect Jeremiah Walker black? And the very first hit was an article that showed a picture of him, and in fact, he was an African-American 17-year-old youth. That crime, if it had been a black man and a white shooter, would have been all over the mainstream media. It would have been designated a hate crime immediately. Charges would have been brought within 12 hours, and they would have included hate crimes. So the media filters and censors. So if you go to search anything, you have to do the extra work to search two sides. I still, to this day, watch or read a half hour of CNN, and then I go to Fox News. I want to know what both sides are saying. I want to know what's being left out, because Fox isn't perfect. They say a lot of stupid crap too that I don't like. They leave out stuff. I want the full picture.
You know what I do? Just real quick. I also get information from Al Jazeera. I watch that faithfully. That's smart. And I also watch RT, because that helps you get the perspective from the Russian loyalist, if you will. I was watching this one lady talking not like a news reporter, but a sarcastic, condescending Russian loyalist. Like everything that everybody else was saying was wrong kind of attitude. And I immediately hated this woman. It's just like, I mean, no, you're wrong. This is completely wrong what you're saying. How she's saying it, presentation, it was terrible. I was like, man, So I mean, I watch RT every now and then. I think one of our former comedians, Dennis Miller, he has a program that's on that network. But I watch all of them. But Al Jazeera to me is the best because they do give you perspective that you will never get. That's non-Western. You know, you'll get a lot of Western perspectives on everybody else's network. Al Jazeera gives you a Middle Eastern perspective, which nobody really
I was
has.
ignorant when I first heard the words Al Jazeera. I was ignorant. One of my friends went to work for them, and I'm like, "You're going to work for a Haji newspaper?" And she schooled me for about 10 minutes straight about how independent they are and how their news is more accurate than CNN or Fox.
See, here's the difference. Here's the difference between our networks and Al Jazeera. There's no advertisement. They are not controlled
you have no
by.
masters.
You have no control by corporations and even politicians. I mean, it is a state run, so there is sort of a bend for Muslim sympathy. You know what I mean? That type of thing on some of their documentaries they might present.
Right.
But the point is that they have no corporate sponsors telling them you can't say this, you can't do that. They say it, and that's what I like about them. So, but
it's outstanding. It's an outstanding news dissemination model. We should have more of those, and we do. And you know, we have like what you're doing right now. Unless you have sponsors, but even if you did have sponsors, they're not going to tell you what they want you to say and not say.
Correct.
Right. So now back to Russia. As you're approaching the news that's coming in, you have to be careful to look at both sides if you can. You can't just listen to CNN. You can't just listen to Fox News because you're not going to have the whole picture, and then you can't determine where you fit. The other thing is, if you only listen to Fox News, you're never going to disagree with the conservatives on any issue. When I disagree with conservatives, it's almost always information that I mined and harvested off of liberal media. Like, I think this is really critical. And the Russian people are learning that too. They're getting independent news through the internet as best they can and encrypted sites like WhatsApp. So we left this where Putin had his troops poised on the border, and it's the response that kind of dictates where he's going to go next. Now you have to know, Shawn, when we are going to film something, whether it's the actors or the crew. So let's say we finish this scene and now we're getting ready to do the next scene. Do we just move the camera and start shooting? No, we have the second team in. We're adjusting the cameras. We're adjusting the lighting. You could make an argument that evolution is the same thing as workshopping a scenario or wargaming a scenario or, you know, doing a focus group on a final cut of a movie. Putin and his inner circle, they workshopped this to death. They had a year to do it. So if Biden and Harris think that any sanctions they came up with were going to be effective, I assure you 100%, they already knew it was coming. One reporter asked, and dude, you know what I find just more exciting than the beautiful woman in Buffalo that I matched with on Bumble, who turned out to be like a fake profile. Dang it!
Beautiful.
And
you have like a million fake profiles everywhere.
But I didn't put them up.
You're the most famous fake profile that I know.
The scamming, the dating scam. Another interview. Even more warming than finding a beautiful Buffalo woman who is maybe independent or open-minded and loves I want to marry a Buffalo girl. But I can't marry a Buffalo girl who's not a Bills fan. You have to be on the couch with me. I want to include you in that part of my life. It's too big a part of my life not to be included. So I met a girl out in LA and she's like, oh, blah, blah. And I go, what do you think about the Bills? And she's like, the who? And I go, never mind. Click, delete the number. Right? So more warming to my heart than finding that beautiful Buffalo, unicorn female was seeing the left media starting to ask not hard questions, but just real questions with substance. So it was mostly left media. One left mainstream media person asked him, do you think that this was Peter Ducey of Fox. He said, do you think, and he was being pejorative. He was using irony and sarcasm. It wasn't a real question. He said, do you think that these sanctions are as powerful as Russian tanks, planes, and bullets? And Biden said, yes, I do. Dude, I tuned you out after that. Like, that's ridiculous. Right? So now we have Putin with his 200,000 troops on the border. We're not really sure what's going to happen. How could we have prevented all of this? So for everybody that I've already put to sleep, talking about acting and girls and conservatism, wake up now. How could we have stopped the Ukrainian invasion? It's really simple. You have to understand how their economy works. 50% of the Russian gross domestic product is oil. Then another thing that's important to them is to be included in world governance, world leadership, world banking. So the SWIFT banking system, which I will admit to you, I never heard the word before 5 days ago. The SWIFT banking system is some kind of a high-tech advanced electronic funds transfer system that is used primarily between nation states. And Europe uses it to pay Russia for their oil. We haven't kicked Russia out of the SWIFT banking system because the EU doesn't want us to. So my solution both involves oil and makes the SWIFT banking reservations a moot point. I call up Putin. Biden calls up Putin. And he says, Vladimir, right now, only me and my 5 handlers in this room, my 5 inner circle. I'm going to try to stop being negative connotative about Biden because it's not helpful. It doesn't bring anybody over to the center or whatever. So I apologize for the couple comments that I've made that are negative connotative. Biden says, me and my 5 inner circle. Even Kamala doesn't know right now. My VP doesn't know. It's just the 5 of us in this room. Tomorrow, in prime time, in 24 hours, I'm going on TV to address my nation and the world. And I will say, to prevent the invasion of Ukraine, we are going to increase oil production. We're going to set a Guinness World Book of Records for oil production in this country. Oil, natural gas, including shaling and coal. Whatever we got, hell, I don't care. We're going to start burning, green seaweed to make energy. However we can make energy, we're going to ask Elon Musk to dump all of his gigawatts of stored electricity in his batteries into the grid. We're going to flood the grid with more energy than the grid has ever seen. We're going to invite foreign nations to bring their gear into our Gulf of Mexico and off of our shores of Texas and Alaska to help increase our production capability. We're going to drive the price of oil from $100 record down to maybe 30. I think we could get it to at least 30. And when I hang up with you, Vladimir, so you know, the next call is going to be from the EU president, and he is going to tell you that they're canceling all of their fuel purchasing contracts from you. And since they're canceling all of them, they're also kicking you out of SWIFT because they don't need to send you money anymore. And they're going to buy oil from us. And we will keep that up until all of your troops are back in their bases, and then we'll unwind all of it. And I'm giving you 24 hours to look like the stud man that you want the world to perceive you as. But make no mistake about it. And this is where Trump would have said it exactly this way. And I'm going to say P. I'm not going to say the whole word, but you know where I'm going. And yes, I am advocating that in the world of international diplomacy, unlike the thing I'm going to read you off my phone of Kamala next, that this is the way. This isn't the way you talk diplomatically in the world. But in this instance, to make a point and to let this man know that you're connecting with him on his level, I would use the foul language and I would say these bad words. Vladimir, in 24 hours, I'm going to go public and then I'm going to do this. And you're still going to end up leaving Ukraine or taking your troops home, but you're going to be going home with your tail between your legs like an effing pea. I would have said those words right on the Zoom call to him. I would look him right in the eyes and say, you're going to go home looking like an effing pea. And that will cause more fear in that man more than anything else. So what did we do? We put in sanctions. Let's just talk about a couple of them. One of the sanctions was we sanctioned their oligarchy. A lot of people don't know what the word oligarchy means. A year ago, I didn't. And I have a master's degree in electrical engineering, and I went to the best school in Buffalo, Canisius College. Sorry, UB, Buff State, and UVille, and Medaille, but Canisius is the best school by far. And
I agree.
We're going to back you into this corner and you will have to go home with your tail between your legs. So what sanctions did they put in place? They said we're gonna sanction your oligarchy. So what does the word oligarchy mean? Well, oligarchs are like the Russian equivalent of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I was talking to my manager yesterday, and he's like, "Yeah, the corporations." No, not the corporations. A corporation is a corporation. I'm talking about the CEOs are like the oligarchs,
Yep.
right? Like Hunter Biden took $1 million from an oligarch in Moscow, like an Elon Musk of Moscow. He doesn't have any specific training or knowledge or experience to give, so that should have been viewed as weird, right? Because that's just peddling money for influence, whatever. I don't want to get too distracted on that. But so let's say there are 10 oligarchs and they each have $10 billion and $9 billion is held in banks outside of Russia. First of all, why would they do that? Well, because if all of my money is held in Russia and Putin decides he doesn't like me anymore, my family's now bankrupt. So I've now leveraged so that my family will be able to be billionaires the rest of their lives. But I still got $1 million in Russia so that Putin's not mad at me. And I live in Russia, so Putin's not mad at me. Same thing you could entertain China, but China hasn't gone into Taiwan yet. So let's just stay focused on Russia. So now imagine that the world just froze 9 billion of the 10 top Russian oligarchs. So they all go, "Oh my God, are you seeing this?" They're all Snapchatting each other, and they go flying over to the Kremlin and they demand an emergency meeting with Putin, who, by the way, is trying to wage a war. And they're like, "Vladimir, this is unsatisfactory. You know, they just took 90% of our wealth." And Vladimir's like, "Who feels the strongest about this point?" And one guy raises his hand. Let's say it's the Russian. I like Elon Musk, so let's say it's the Russian. Oh, hang on one second, Shawn. I'm gonna keep talking while I'm trying to plug in my laptop because it is now wanting to die.
No problem.
So the Jeff Bezos of Russia says, "Me, Vladimir, it's me. I feel the strongest about this." And Vladimir Putin, not figuratively, but literally, goes over to him and says, "Hey, what's that?" Boom. And he puts a bullet in his brain. And now he looks at the other 9 oligarchs and he goes, "Does anybody else still have an objection?" Vladimir Putin doesn't give a crap about the money of his oligarchs. Vladimir Putin also doesn't care about the money of his people. I don't know how many Americans know or care, but the Russian stock market crashed 50% yesterday. So however much you have in the bank, whether it's $1,000 or $1 million, imagine you woke up today and it was in half. You'd be freaked out. You would be like, "Oh my God." But what you're not going to do in Russia is complain to Putin about it. So all of the sanctions on the banks, that's the sanctions on the oligarchs and the stock market affecting the people effectively. You know, like inflation is a tax on all. You know, Biden says no new taxes on people that make less than 400,000. Well, 7.5% inflation, and I'd argue it's well over 10, really. But 7 to 12% inflation is a tax on all Americans. So, you know, read between the lines. So what else did we do? We sanctioned their banks. We sanctioned their biggest civilian bank, and we sanctioned their military bank. If sanctioning those 2 banks would bring Vladimir Putin to his knees, then Vladimir Putin is the worst military strategist of modern times. He's had a year to stockpile alt currencies, Bitcoin, physical gold and silver. I guarantee you he has enough funds of various kinds to continue his little war games for as long as he wants to, because he's not a moron. He doesn't just think in the moment. He's not only not just reading off the teleprompter, but he's not reading words on the teleprompter that he doesn't even really understand the context of. So that you can tell when somebody's reading off a teleprompter whether they fully understand what they're saying or not, right? From where they emphasize and where they put the accents and how they truncate it. You know, a sentence truncates with a period. So if you're saying, you know, "We have to get out of this war right now," it's "We have to get out of this war right now and tomorrow." But when you say "We have to get out of this war right now tomorrow," you could tell I didn't know that the period was coming, right? That's what we have in the White House. We have somebody who's reading off a teleprompter. You can see his eyes going back and forth, and he doesn't seem very fervent about it. So the sanctions on the people didn't work. The stock market crashed. The sanctions on the oligarchs won't work. He's planned already by wargaming for the sanctions on the banks. We really didn't do anything. A leftist reporter asks him, why not immediately kick them out of SWIFT? Now, Biden could have said a couple things. He could have said, and the diplomatic answer should have been, but it wasn't on the teleprompter. And he either didn't get it from his pre-briefing or he didn't remember it. Though he probably remembers what flavor of ice cream he was going to get as soon as the conference was over. That's not mean.
Chocolate chip.
Yeah. That's the favorite. So he should have said, the U.S. is a powerful country, but we do not dominate our neighbors. We are equal partners with the European nations. So that is a decision that will have to be coordinated with Europe and the rest of the participants in the SWIFT banking system. We don't make unilateral decisions on behalf of the world as much as we'd like to think we should be able to. So the reporter said, why don't we immediately kick him out of SWIFT? That's Moscow, right?
This is,
so.
Yeah, this is, I believe this is an, I don't know exactly. I'm still looking.
I hope it's Moscow, because that says that there are people that are still, they know that 137 were put in jail 2 nights ago, and they're not afraid. And the more numbers you have, the less afraid you can be. Not that he can't put all of these people in prison or drop mustard gas on them, but the world is watching. Thank God for the internet. That's one of the great things, is that, the Russians are saying they have the airport outside of Kyiv, and the Ukrainians are saying they have it. And we won't know for sure until someone gets an iPhone and zooms in and we see what marking is on the tail of the aircraft that are parked there. But this is encouraging. It could be Kyiv, but I doubt it, because Kyiv's under martial law right now, and so the people aren't supposed to be out on the street.
I think the lady reporting was from London. That's what the report.
Yeah, that does kind of look like London. But I hope there's still protests going on in Moscow. I really do. So what Biden should have said was, that's not a decision we can make unilaterally, but it's absolutely on the table. Even if it wasn't on the table, like, when you say potential, sorry, I can't help nature. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I would love to run for office, but when they were talking about Omicron, and Fauci said, well, Omicron is still potentially very deadly. Yes, you know what else is potentially very deadly? Eating chocolate chip ice cream. You could hypothetically spill some on the ground, and if you're wearing brand new shoes that are not broken in yet, and the tread's not scuffed, you could slip and you could have a head injury. So eating chocolate chip ice cream is factually 100% potentially very deadly. But we know that the virus was mutating just like all viruses ever have. They mutate to get more contagious and less effective. So is it possible that a more dangerous variant will come? Yes. It's also possible that the most beautiful single girl in Buffalo who loves the Buffalo Bills heard my statement 5 minutes ago, and she's driving over to my sister's house to knock on the door. I'm not holding my breath. And when we're done here, I'm not going to sit on the couch waiting for her to show up. But it's possible that she would come. Right? Mm-hmm. So Biden could have said, is it a little white lie? I don't know. If what Fauci said is a lie, then yes. If what Fauci said is not a lie, then no. Biden could have said, that is potentially in the mix. We have to coordinate with our allied partners. Instead, he said a flat out lie, because they think that the leftist media is going to only keep repeating what he said. The media's job is to stand in front of the podium with a microphone, asking hard questions, hold leaders accountable. But the left mainstream media has turned into, their head is turned to the podium. They're facing the crowd with a microphone, echoing what they hear from behind them. That's what the left media has turned into. But they're starting to ask questions. So this was a left media reporter asked the question, and he said, she said, why are we not immediately kicking them out of the SWIFT banking system? And Biden said, what we're doing is worse than kicking them out of the SWIFT banking system. Okay, we'll find an independent, middle of the road economist who will echo that, because it's factually not true. But he thinks that you're so dumb that you're only going to believe what you see on CNN. But the problem is that CNN is tired of being known as a network of pedophiles and married people that cheat on their husbands and wives, and an agency that calls up the governor of New York because maybe you used to be the press secretary for the governor of New York, and you say, hey, when your brother interviews you,
they're just celebrities and actors. That's in my opinion.
yeah.
They're not journalists. They're not journalists. They're opinionated people working under an organization that tells them what they're supposed to support. And you know, they might be genuinely interested in that, supporting that, but they're just actors. That's all they are. They're not journalists.
100%. I mean, I think they all started as journalists, and somehow we got morphed into this. And the sponsorship thing, for people that didn't catch that, Shawn said Al Jazeera has no sponsors, and so CNN has sponsors, or Fox News is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and so even Fox News has the same thing. They're slanted to the right. I think they're more accurate than the left slants, but in any case, we only have one. You have MSNBC, CNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, and CNN. That's at least six. And then we have Fox.
Even a public broadcasting.
PBS, all those. There's so many of them, and yet the mainstream media wants Fox News taken off the air so that we won't have any voice, because that's what they want. They do want.
Well, listen,
that's the direction we're going.
I was a fan of watching. Here's what I saw. What happened? YouTube has been a platform for fun for a long time, and then all of a sudden, a lot of political views started getting on there, and then that's when the controversy started. But Alex Jones was deplatformed by everybody because of a lot of issues, okay? And I'm not saying he was the best human being on planet. I'm just saying his team dug up a lot of dirt on a lot of people, and he had a lot of informants to give him information to talk about talking points that the mainstream media will never talk about.
Right.
That's why they had to deplatform him, because he was a threat to the narrative, the word narrative. That was another thing that really perturbed me. The word the narrative came out, and it was the left always saying that their narrative was the correct one, and what everybody else is spreading is misinformation. And that's not true, because everybody did that. Everybody spread misinformation. But there are some people that were so on point with asking the right questions. I'm not saying conspiracy theorists are legitimate journalists either, but they ask the right questions. And people don't ask those kind of questions in a corporate funded environment. Alex Jones was completely independent, and he was selling all kinds of pills and solutions and whatever to try to keep him afloat. But that was his own doing. That wasn't GlaxoSmithKline, giving him billions of dollars so that he can have a broadcast. So
yeah, whenever somebody tries to silence a voice, before
that's a caution. It's a red flag.
You got to ask why.
It's a red flag, though, because Joe Rogan was another one. They've been trying to deplatform him, but because he's so liberal in his thinking, and he's pot smoker, all that stuff, so he kind of like is a moderate, if you will, and everything. But Joe Rogan was given this opportunity to go to Spotify, and it completely took him off YouTube, which was the biggest platform. Even though Spotify is a good platform for people who want to listen or whatever, to me that was a move to get him off of YouTube. It wasn't really
100%.
a move. Wasn't a move to give him a bigger option and money and all that. Somebody funded Spotify to get him off of YouTube. That's my opinion. So these are people that talk their mind, though, but once you start getting paid for it, that's when you're canceled, or you're deplatformed, or you have no other choice but to completely be independent. And you should be able to, especially in America, especially in American what am I saying? What I'm trying to say, the internet, you know what I mean? Our access to the internet. We should be able to say whatever we want to say.
As long as
Now,
it's not inciting violence against
right.
somebody or undermining our democratic
Well,
principles. Yeah.
they label some weird, obscure things as hate speech now, though, which I don't get. I don't understand why people say they might say something that's a little controversial, but it's not hateful. It's just how they feel, and they consider that hate speech. Like I personally, okay, and people, if you want to flag me and all that, that's fine. But I personally believe that whatever your gender is at birth, that's your gender. And now we have a million genders, okay. And for men going into the Olympics as a woman, it, to me is totally illogical. It's irrational and it's unscientific. So stuff like that that's controversial, considered hate speech. I don't hate somebody that wants to be a transgender. I don't hate anybody for their lifestyle or whatever. But too often right now we're getting too much into sexuality. You know what I mean? Like that's an important topic to talk about. While these
Hey,
people
Shawn,
in Ukraine are fighting for their lives. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask. I think we covered what's going on in Ukraine pretty well. And I just say, like,
Yeah.
I laid out how we could have kept him out, and I think that plan still works to get him out. We go on TV right now. It could still be a private call. Still try to let Putin save face. And as much as I want that dude to burn, I think that's the right move to do. And then he gets out, and but I would say you got to. But if you're going to play that card, I would say if we're not going to go public with what we did or what we said here, then we want you completely out of the breakaway regions, and we want you out of the Crimea too. There's no reason that Russia should be in the Crimea. I mean, in 2008, under Obama, Putin went into Georgia, another former Soviet bloc nation. In 2014, under Obama, Putin went into Crimea, Ukraine. And now in 2022, under Biden, Putin has gone into Ukraine in the breakaway regions, and now they're trying to go to Kiev, the capital. They're probably there, or they'll be there before the end of the day, right? Or the end of our day, because it's nighttime there now, right? But it's interesting to ask, like, not only, wow, how has none of this happened under Trump? But for the people that claimed that Trump was under the thumb of Putin, how does it make sense that he didn't attack anybody under Trump when Trump had the ability to be an advocate for him?
Trump was the one that had control of, because listen, the example that Trump showed the world that he is not a pushover was the eradication of ISIS. That right there showed that you make if I'm telling you, if Putin made a move in Ukraine, or even had his Belarus, all his troops in Belarus doing, operations or whatever, or testing out their military abilities, Trump would have had people in Ukraine already on that border, knowing that he's already, it's like, okay, well, we're going to watch what they're doing, because that's, to me, I would never allow him to be in Belarus to do military operations. I wouldn't have allowed it. I would have done everything I could for NATO to be beefed up on those borders, because
we could have put people into Poland if it was amenable to Poland. I still no American boots on the ground in Ukraine. Not then, not now, not ever. To be clear about that, right? But
absolutely.
So I just want to talk about one last thing, and then we can maybe we could riff a little bit if you got time and you want to. So what happened? What started us on the path? Let's just back up a little bit. So on day one in office, Biden signed an executive order scaling back our oil production. So under Trump, we were a net exporter of oil. Under Trump, we imported 0.0 barrels of Russian oil. After the executive order was signed, and I don't know if it ramped up, digitally, or it took analog path, but right now we import almost 600,000 barrels of Russian oil per day. And I want to really dig in on this a little second. So just follow me through the logic. And if it doesn't make sense to you, tell me, because then it won't make sense to anybody else. So day one, we cut back our own oil production. We stopped shaling. I don't think shaling is good. Shaling is bad. If people don't understand what shaling is, it's oil that's embedded in shale rock, and they use pressurized gas. So basically you can cause like sinkholes, and there's all kinds of reasons why that's not good for the environment. And I do care about the environment. But there are times to put my cares for the environment on hold to benefit the American people in the world. And that's the case I'm about to make right now. The other thing he did was they started pushing this, I don't want to say narrative, it's the wrong word, it's negatively connotative, but they made climate change a priority. And that was the reason why we pull back American production of fuel oil, because we care about the climate, we want to reduce global warming, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to make a case that global warming is or is not a real thing, or that climate change is or is not a real thing. Not here to make that case. I'm not even sure myself, or that I've made a decision, because there's been so many other things to focus on. But I will say this. I don't understand how, on the one hand, pulling back American production of oil and energy products, and then last summer of 21, so we had the BLM summer of 2020, and then we had the oil price crisis of summer of 2021. In 2021, 6 months after Biden took office, fuel prices started jacking up, and the American people were hurting, especially low-income people were hurting. And Biden had a decision to make. We could either increase production of our own energy products to bring the price down, or we could release some of the strategic oil reserves, which everybody should understand. That is not the reason for the strategic oil reserves. The strategic oil reserves, the word strategic is in there. It's a military thing. We want to have enough fuel to defend ourselves and to keep our country running if we get into some kind of a conflict and we are cut off from OPEC, Russia, Venezuela, Canada, et cetera. It's not to bring the price of fuel down by 3 cents a gallon, but that's what Biden did. That's what Biden or his handlers decided that we should do. So that was a second choice, reserves, release some of the strategic oil reserves. The third thing we could do is we could ask other countries to increase their production. So he chose a combination of 2 and 3. Biden went on TV and basically begged. It wasn't, hey, he got on TV and he basically said, I've asked, and the word asked to Putin is I begged Putin to increase his oil production and OPEC to increase their oil production. Think of this from an economic standpoint. We're asking them to do more work. Producing more oil is more work than producing less oil, to do more work for less money. Because as you increase the supply, this is something Scott said, it's supply and demand, but then he didn't really understand how that manifests. So we were going to increase the supply and then the price would come down. So that would help the American people. What did Putin see? Putin saw a president who was unwilling or too afraid to oppose the climate folks and increase oil production in the US, even if only for a couple of weeks, because he knew that AOC and the squad would have immediately started attacking him. So what Putin heard this is what Putin heard. I, Joe Biden, am too afraid to make a move that will help the American people. And Putin extrapolated that to say, if he won't increase the fuel production to help his own people, he's certainly not going to increase the oil production to help the Ukrainian people. So Putin planned for sanctions. He planned for getting kicked out of the SWIFT banking system, because we already have established that he's got enough money to fight this war. They're not shutting down his tankers and his shipping and his non Nord Stream 2 pipeline methods of shipping oil to Europe. So Europe's still going to get the oil. SWIFT banking would just stop the process for getting Russia the money. But they don't need the money right now. They can get the money. You can give us an IOU. He'll still be fine with that. They just don't want to have to store the stuff. So none of the stuff that we did was going to work. What I find really interesting, and now I'm going to sound a little Trumpish, because I'm going to blow my own horn. You could say I'm going to trump my own Trump. 3 days ago, I was the only person that I was talking about what I just laid out for you, using oil in the SWIFT banking system to bring them to their knees. By the time I woke up yesterday, I was starting to think that maybe I had missed something, and I was worried that I was embarrassing myself saying something dumb. It was just yesterday that the mainstream media started to pick up on this, and the MPs over in England started to say oil is the key. So I'm glad that I was able to. I'm glad that I was just not stupid. I don't need to take credit for the idea. I'm sure that they didn't hear me on Facebook and come up with the idea. But when several intelligent people come up with the idea independently, you know that you have a swelling of a good idea. Okay, so we set all of this up. On day one, the executive orders cutting back production, and last summer showing that we would not increase production to decrease our own pain. So he knew we wouldn't do it now. Putin outsmarted Biden. Okay, so that's really everything I want to say about Russia. I just want to close on the Russia topic by reading something that Kamala Harris said at the German Security Summit. And before I read it, I will tell you this. I Google searched this, and I think I threw a whole hodgepodge of words together. I wrote Vice President Harris's comments after German Security Council meeting. And on Google, the first hit I got was from whitehouse.gov, and it was the transcript of her prepared comments, which any monkey who could speak could have sounded intelligent saying. So a llama or a speaking dog could have spoken those words and sounded intelligent. But I'm talking about what was said as the answer to a question asked by a reporter. So I'm going to say it slow and just really concentrate on the words. The question was, will sanctions deter Putin? Here's the answer. And so she's talking about the window of opportunity of sanctions working. Will sanctions deter Putin? Quote, within the context then of the fact that the window is still opening, although it is absolutely narrowing, but within the context of a diplomatic path still being open. End quote. What?
Yeah, it's mumble jumble.
It's just word salad. That's on top of the day before, and when she started her speech. And I told you, diplomats have a way of speaking. International diplomacy has rules, just like legislative bodies use Robert's rules for maintaining decorum and order. There's rules to international diplomacy. You can't just go into the UN. You know, the representative from Ukraine didn't go into the UN and say, listen, you MFer, get your people out of my country or I'm going to blank your blank. That just makes the rhetoric, and the next thing you know, we're arming our nukes. Oh, segue. Do you, Shawn Patrick Greene, believe that if the Ukraine still had all of the old Russian nukes that were left behind? So when the Soviet Union broke up, Russia had nukes in different countries. One of those countries was Ukraine. And because Ukraine is so big, they had the most nukes outside of Russia. When Russia pulled out, they didn't say, give me my guns, give me just like when we pulled out of Afghanistan, so militarily adept and left $6 billion in gear behind. After we were gone, we didn't say, hey, by the way, we're coming to get our gear now. Or send us our gear. We demand that you send it. We most vociferously demand that you send us our gear back. Like that's nonsense, right? So we left the gear behind. It's their gear now. Russia left the nukes behind. They now belong to the Ukrainians. Ukraine was the only former Soviet bloc nation that voluntarily gave up all of their nukes. American and British, at least, nuclear engineers went in and disassembled those weapons. They took the uranium and the plutonium, and they brought it back to our countries to either reuse it or dispose of it. Why did they do that? This was under another Democratic president, President Bill Clinton. They were hoping that.
You mean President Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, there you go. The Ukrainians were hoping that we would let them into NATO. Hey, we'll give up our nukes. We really want to join NATO. If we're in NATO, we don't need nukes. But Clinton couldn't promise them that we'd go into NATO, but they did imply that we would protect you. So Ukraine thought that we would protect them. Not boots on the ground. There's other ways. I don't want to see any more people like you and me or any other parents get the knock on the door. If they still had the nukes, this would not be happening. 100%. Now that's scary as hell, because if Ukraine had to resort to a nuke, let's say President Zelensky he's not in the presidential palace, and that guy's got, I think I heard yesterday they said that he used to be an actor and a comedian. I really want to look that up. I see you looking up stuff as we're talking. First of all, I don't like putting my cheaters on because I think it makes me look 1,000 years old, and I don't want to be single the rest of my life. Second, because these are just reading glasses. But
yeah, me too.
That guy has a ball sack, man. He's a former actor. If what I heard is true, he's leading his country. He knows that he's number one on the hit list. They're going to kill him, and they're going to kill his family. But they're all still in the country. He should get his family the hell out of the country. 100%. But Western media, mainstream media, have attacked him in the last couple of days. They attacked him for going to the Germany Security Summit. What they were implying was that he was not going to go back to the Ukraine. They were implying that he abandoned his country, which helps nothing. Doesn't help the Ukrainian people. Doesn't help the world situation, right, for balance of power and peace and security. But when the conference was over, he went right back to Kyiv. I thought it was Kiev, but they're saying Kyiv. He went right back to Kyiv,
It
and now
depends
he's
on
hiding.
as far as the pronunciation. I'm sorry. Yeah, Kiev and Kyiv are two different pronunciation. One's Russian, one's Ukrainian. I don't
That
know
makes
which
sense.
one.
I
So,
bet Kiev is the Russian pronunciation because it used to be spelled K-I-E-V, and now it's K-Y-I-V.
mhm,
So thank you for educating me on that.
sure.
So he went back, and now he is probably every 2 or 3 hours being shuttled to different locations. They didn't have enough time to plan, or they would have taken a play from the playbook of Saddam Hussein, who in the Gulf War, when we had won and we were hunting him down, they had like 3 or 4 Saddam Hussein lookalikes in his uniforms that they were moving around the country like a shell game. Meanwhile, he was in that hole that we found him in, like a little crybaby.
The
So
rat.
Zelensky is there. He's representing his people. He probably will die, and he knows that. But he knows that if he can stay alive long enough, my mom said, well, why aren't they fighting? I go, Mom, if they fight head to head, the war's going to be over in 24 hours. I believe militarily, strategically, what they're trying to do is distribute their forces, hit and run kind of thing with their tanks and their airplanes and their larger regular army troops to try to delay the eventual takeover long enough that the Western powers can get a crap ton of munitions into that country so that the people will be armed for the follow-on to this, which is the guerrilla war. Russia lost in Afghanistan. They were in there for almost 11 years. They
Mhm.
lost to a bunch of Bedouins on camels who had AK-47s and sticks with a slingshot, living in caves, just like France lost to the Vietnamese living underground in tunneling systems, running around with no shoes, right? You think we're big bad, we're undefeatable. No, dude, we are absolutely defeatable. Russia was defeated by both Chechnya and Afghanistan. France was defeated by Vietnam. And worst of all, America was defeated by both Vietnam and Afghanistan after 2 other superpowers were defeated. We're so, I don't know what the word is. Pride is not the word, but we're so, whatever the negative connotative word is,
Arrogant.
arrogant, thank you, that we
Yep.
think that even though Russia got beat by the Afghans and France got beat by the Vietnamese, that we're going to roll in and win. And the big losers were the troops and the parents of the troops who died.
I think
So
I think that strategically we had the best plan for ISIS, who was really guerrilla warfare orientated. And I'm not just saying it was Trump; it was under his leadership. But the chiefs of staff, they were the ones that were involved in how to take them down. And I know Trump took a lot of advice through them, but
right.
it was him actually saying, "Go for it." He's the one that says, "Do it." And without that kind of, when you're in the military, if you like back in when I was in, George H.W. Bush, his okay for us to go and invade to liberate Kuwait felt good. Like, okay, we're doing a good thing. Our leader says it's good to do it. Let's do it. Even though there are a lot of conscientious objectors throughout the time, different people. I even had a little bit of like, because I'm a skeptic by nature. I was even skeptical about what we're doing. But because you have your leader saying, it's okay to do this, you kind of feel like it's ethical, it's moral, and it's the right thing to do. So Trump being that kind of a figurehead for the go ahead with ISIS, to
Yep.
me, that's what empowered all the forces to go and eradicate them. So that's what you need. You need somebody like that. I
And
personally don't feel that with Biden. one of the reasons why I got out was because Clinton was elected, and I just didn't have a vote of confidence for him.
And we don't have a voice when we're in uniform, so you give that up, right? The ability to protest or speak out against the commander in chief, because he does lead all the forces.
Exactly.
I think it's important to point out, so people don't think that we're like. And I don't know your opinion. We haven't pre-discussed any of this, but for all of Clinton's flaws, Clinton had us fiscally on a path that if we executed the future year's budget that he had laid out, within 7 years the national debt would have been erased. And you know what screwed that up? 9/11, and Bush decided that it was, again, a perception thing, a Putin-like thing. I don't want to look like a little P. I have to strike at something. By the way, Biden just did this too. When we did the drone strike, where we killed 7 kids and 4 adults, the guy was delivering water for an aid agency, right? What happened there was Biden was going on TV that day to give a speech. We had already lost 13 American service members at the whatever gate outside the Kabul airport, and it had been 4 days of him getting slammed. Although, when someone asked him about it, was George Stephanopoulos asked him on ABC, what do you, they're also calm. Mr. President, what do you think when you see those images of Afghan citizens falling off the wheel well of the sea? That was 3 days ago, 4 days ago. That's what he thought. It was a couple days ago. It was over, right? So, but he was getting pelted in the media, not the mainstream media. He was getting they didn't cover it at all. He was getting pelted in the right media, in the right-leaning media, and he wanted to do something in the same way that George Bush wanted to do something after 9/11. So what Biden did was he's like, find me a target, and dude, I wasn't in the room. This is my Hollywood recollection of how this probably played out. It's an illustration of how I think this played out. And someone came in and said, "Hey, Mr. Biden, we have this car. It might have explosives in it. It could be heading to the airport as a suicide bomber. Blow it up." But sorry, I didn't tell you the negative. Blow it up. But we're not 100. Blow it up. But we're not 100% sure. Okay, well, blow it up. I need it in time for my press conference. I want to lead my press conference off on this. And they're like, "Well, CIA has drones in the area that we haven't coordinated with. We can independently confirm with them." Nah, just blow it up. So the car pulls into a residential neighborhood. I knew it was BS as soon as I saw where the location was. If you have a suicide bomber that's headed to the airport to blow up innocent American service members and innocent Afghan civilians, and you have good intel and solid intel, and it's headed to the airport to execute the suicide bomb, and you have a couple miles of open space between the residential area where it is momentarily parked and the airport, wouldn't the smart military thing to wait till it's in the open area to reduce collateral damage?
All right.
If you go back and look that day, you will see that, like a couple days ago for his press conference that got slid like an hour, the day of the drone strike, that press conference was slid almost 6 hours. It kept getting slid an hour at a time. We didn't know what the hell was going on. Just kept getting slid. I believe, I would postulate that he wanted the drone strike to be completed with some battle damage assessment pictures so he could get on TV and say, "Look what I did. I swung my big stick just like George did, when he went after Afghanistan and Iraq after 9/11." So Biden was so desperate to have something to show, to serve up, to dish up to the American people. And then in the days, it was very quickly, dude. It was guys like you and me. It was former Army bomb damage battle assessment folks who looked at those pictures and said, the trees do not look like how they would look if there was a secondary explosion. The buildings don't have the residue soot patterns that they would have in the secondary explosions that not me, but the speaker, saw with IEDs when I was over serving in the desert, in the Gulf. So you already knew something was probably not right. And then when did they release the news? Who delivered the news that we killed civilian kids, and when was it delivered? The news was delivered at like 6 o'clock East Coast time on a Friday, and it was delivered by the military commander over in the Gulf. Why was it not Biden? Because I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever bounced off me sticks to you. Why was it 6 o'clock at night? the news cycle is over for 72 hours. And sadly, Americans are really that dumb, that short memory natured. If you release the bad news on Friday at 6 o'clock, by Monday at 8, it was nowhere in the news cycle. They're not dumb. Democrats are way smarter than Republicans.
Well,
Democrats are way more committed.
Around here during Lent, it's fish fry night, so you can get distracted. Food, entertainment.
Look at this. But to complete the statement about Clinton and Bush.
Yeah.
If Bush had been more patient, this is Alan criticizing a Republican president. Bush effed us all, not just for a couple of years, probably now for eternity, because we're never going to get the national debt under control. It is between the Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill, and I know Build Back Better is not passed yet, but we spent so much money because of the China virus that, I called it that we're never going to get back to a place where any president, Democrat or Republican, could lay out a genius economic spending plan like Bill Clinton did to get us out of the national debt. And that's something that hopefully Scott Snelson is listening to. For the most part, Republicans are not adverse to criticizing their own side. They're not adverse to complimenting the other side. But show me the article where any Democratic legislator or any Democratic leaning newspaper ever complimented Trump on anything he did. So Trump never did anything good, and Biden never does anything wrong. Though now they're starting to finally ask some hard questions. Hey, one other thing I marked up for a non-Russia discussion, because now we're getting into like where America's going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know, but the Department of Homeland Security, like a week ago, they modified the definition of terrorism on their website. And it now says,
or domestic terrorism.
Yeah, it now says, quote, threat actors that seek to exacerbate societal friction, to sow discord and undermine public trust in government institutions, to encourage unrest. It continues, setting public trust in government and cohesiveness as the litmus test for terrorism, intentionally targets any person, organization, or movement that seeks to blow the whistle on any tyranny, abuses, corruption, or misinformation sowed by our very own government. I'm sorry, that's the response to it. So basically what they've put in place is a definition for terrorism.
Is this January the 6th last year? You think that spurred up this new definition?
Oh yeah. So and they're seeing what's happening in Canada. So now they're saying, look, if you're an American and you spread misinformation, disinformation, there's a third one, the three informations, I forget what the acronym stands for now, but misinformation, disinformation that causes American citizens to lose confidence in the federal government, you're a terrorist. That is completely inconsistent with freedom of speech, freedom of the press. So Americans, and here's the thing that scares me, and I fight with my manager all the time. I hope he doesn't ever see this. I'll be like, man, he's like, dude, I don't care. I'm trying to get you auditions. I go, listen, you're a leftist and you need to care. I'm trying to show you facts and try to bring you more to the middle where you will make your own decisions and even care to watch the news, because he never does, right? I'm like, you have to see what's going on around you, because you'll eventually start to see things you don't agree with, or they're going to come after you at some point. If you don't speak up now to defend me, if the New York Times doesn't speak up now to protect Project Veritas's right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press, then when they go after the New York Times, when they go after my manager, it's going to be too late, because the New York Times will say, wait a minute, they completely deplatformed Project Veritas. My manager will be like, wait a minute, oh no, Alan's in a political prison. I don't want to go to, then it's too late. If you wait till it affects you, it's too late. We need to band together as citizens. I would love to be arm in arm holding an American flag with your buddy, Scott Snelson, opposing something, either something that he brought to me that I agree with or something that I brought to him that he would agree with. But it's when we can come together as people of different minds and agree on something that affects all of us. Maybe it doesn't affect all of us now, but if it affects half of us now, it could affect the other half later. Hypothetically, let's say if Trump comes back into power, and Trump would start doing what the Democrats started to Democrats. You and I would oppose it. They think we wouldn't, but we would, because we believe in freedom, which is now a word that they think is a dirty word, a racist word, right? They want to tear down all the institutions. It scares me really badly, to the point that I've started researching expat communities in Mexico. There are little communities in Mexico that are all Americans. They have their own little security, not police, it's not allowed, forces. They have their own doctors and nurses. They have clinics. They have fire departments. It's like going to a sandals resort in Jamaica. I don't want to say this for sure, that every land outside of an expat, I don't want to indict Mexico, but if you go to a sandals resort in Jamaica, on the resort, it's beautiful. But if you want to go see the 3 waterfalls, whatever, out in town, on the way to there, you might get a bullet hole going through your van. Same thing in Puerto Rico. That actually happened to me when I was with my military buddies in the Navy van out in Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico. Somebody shot a gun right through the window in the van that we were sitting in. Nobody got hurt, but it was still pretty scary. But outside the Jamaican resort, it's a crap hole. I've still only sworn once. Yes. Unless that counts as a swear word. But you stay on the resort then, and you're safe. So if I can get a studio condo inside this community, and it either be cheap enough that it won't hurt me every month, or I get 3 of my other buddies who are a little bit fearful to chip in, or we Airbnb it so it pays for itself. Then if crap really goes downhill here, because the way things are going, you're not going to be able to go to Australia or New Zealand. We already knew those were worse than America. You're not going to be able to go to Canada because they are now way worse than America. Isn't it interesting, Shawn, that for maybe the first time in history, right as China probably intentionally released the coronavirus, every major democratic nation in the world was run by liberals. There wasn't a single conservative government to stand up against some of this tyrannical mandates. I find that very, very interesting. So if you were going to bug out of America, you got to go to a third world country. Why do I think Mexico is safe? Because if Mexico turned over even one American as a, oops, that's my sock, as a political prisoner, if they, what's it called when you extradite? If Mexico extradited even a single expat American, all the other expat Americans would be like, we're not safe here, we're going somewhere else. And then Mexico loses all that tax income. So I'm seriously thinking about a bug out place. One of my buddies here in town, Tim, I'm not going to say his last name just in case he wouldn't want to put out there. He's got a sweet cabin about 3 hours outside of Buffalo, out in the boonies. You know, like, we're getting to that place. Yep. And even if a Republican,
one of the things we are, so people don't know regionally what we are related to in Canada. We're an hour from, or 2 hours from Toronto, and our city borders the bridge that crosses over the Peace Bridge to Fort Erie, Niagara, and then Ontario, and then also north of us, where Niagara Falls is, we have in Niagara Falls, New York, and Youngstown. They all cross over to the Niagara Falls side, Canada. So regionally, we are very close to Canada, and we do have very democratic controlled state. We are very much run by socialists, in my opinion, state-wise. Even though we have a lot of Republican in the countryside, so
right,
we have influence from Canada, believe it or not, and especially in our government and our state government. So there's going to be some issues in the future, I think, for New York State when it comes to stricter. I mean, I think we had the strictest coronavirus mandates in this country. Maybe California might have beat us.
I think LA County was a little worse. California overall has reduced some, but LA still got masks. And
because I've traveled quite a bit, I've been in Georgia. Georgia's a lot looser than most states, and even Florida with Rick DeSantis in charge is very loose. This past coronavirus kind of peaked a little bit everywhere, but for the most part, it wasn't strict mandates like New York State. So, but we're real close to Canada. We get a lot of influence from Ottawa, Toronto, because of that, of our region. We're right across the lake of Ontario. So, anyways, that was just my little snippet on that.
Yeah, Canada concerns me greatly now. I mean, I feel for the people of Canada that, are having to deal with this. I mean, Cass Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history. And you would think if someone came to you and said, hey, New York State invoked martial law for the first time in the state's history, you would be like, holy crap, whatever happened must be serious. And then you're like, yeah, these truckers are blocking the city hall down in Buffalo. Do they have guns? Are they shooting people? But no, they're parked. They're parked down there, and you're like, I don't get it, man.
They're in
Dude? They're
jacuzzis.
blocked. You can't get through there. But can you go around? I mean, can you walk into Parliament? Yeah, but these trucks are blocking the entire street. Well, I read that they're singing like the national anthem. Well, the national anthem is racist, bro. Like they're down there. You don't get. You're too dumb to get it. There are trucks blocking City Hall. Oh crap! Well, we better do martial law. Like what?
Right.
Very, very concerned for where this all leads. And there's a lot of words. Here's where the one or two pretty single girls in Buffalo who are Bills fans who are thinking about trying to figure out where to meet me are like, oh yeah, I'm out. The guy's going to start using those words. I'm out. There were words that were thrown around for years that every time someone said it, you got to eye roll from me. I didn't talk to my sister Val for 2 years. Long story. I have a very dynamic family history. And in November of 2020, we made up. And I hadn't spoken to her for 2 years. And in one single phone call, she discussed the deep state, leaving New York for safety and personal freedom, and some other things. And money out of the banks and into physical gold and silver. And I called up my mom and I said, did her husband radicalize her? And I have to be truthful, there's not a single word now that I roll an eye on. I'm not completely invested either, but I'm like, I don't know. I mean, deep state could really just be the career civil servants. You ask yourself, how is the FBI now surveilling parents of school children who go to school boards and raise their voice or pull their mask down with it? How does that rate an FBI surveillable offense? And then at the higher level, how does the Department of Justice redefine terrorism? Like they were saying that the number one domestic threat was, these parents or people speaking out against the government or whatever. Like that's the number one domestic threat now. Like, what? How does that pass?
Speaking your mind. When free speech becomes to be the center of attack, that's when we are transitioning to a different type of government.
Right. So one of those words was
locally and nationally. It doesn't matter.
Sorry. One of those words that I'm still not bought into. So the phrase that I believe the least is called the Great Reset.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even understand what it was, but I was judging it negatively. And then I asked a couple people, the Great Reset is supposed to be, it's really simply just a transition from democracy, which we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, but they're similar enough. So people understand the difference in democracy and a constitutional republic is in a constitutional republic, the power lies in the states. Mm-hmm. The founding fathers set this place up to be, if you look in the Constitution, I think there's a sentence that says, no federal law shall be passed that trumps the laws of the state. So they can do anything in Congress, but they can't overturn a state law. Like the states are supposed to have some degree of autonomy, right? But now we have two schools of thought in this country, basically, liberal and conservative. And we have some conservative states that go, I don't understand why it is not racist to expect an identification to be shown to sign up for food stamps or welfare or unemployment insurance, to receive a stimulation check, to get a job, to travel on a plane, train, or a bus, to drive on the roads legally, to buy a gun, to buy alcohol. But it is racist to have to show an ID to exercise the most fundamental right of legal citizens, not illegal alien criminals, but legal citizens. How does that make sense? When Kamala Harris talks about potentially 500, what did she say? Was it 50 million? I think she said 50.5 million. Out of 330 million people in this country, Kamala Harris got on TV and said it could be as many as 50 million people who don't have the ability to get an ID. Really? Because nobody's been able to name one for me. Name one.
Because a majority of them are illegal, for one, or
Yeah.
undocumented
Yeah.
is the new catchphrase.
Yeah.
I love
Name
that
one
word.
legal citizen who can't get an ID. And if you can't, I can find, as a military guy, I can find 2 or 3 alternate solutions. For example, you're currently not allowed to harvest ballots, and you can't cure ballots. So you cannot harvest ballots, is not the negative one. You can't go to somebody's house to pick up their ballot and transport it. Just the same way, a single police officer cannot go to a crime scene and collect evidence and then take it into the evidence locker. That violates the chain of custody. There has to be 2 people all the way. Just like when I was in the military and females started being into the squadrons, I would never counsel a female enlisted in my office alone, even if the door was open. I always had another female in the room because I wasn't going to open myself up to a sexual harassment allegation, right? Because that was one of the things that was guilty until proven innocent,
right?
Regardless of what the law states. So
UCMJ, that's the way that works. Yep.
Exactly, and we have rules that are laid out, and you want to try and keep yourself as clean as humanly possible, right? So we have these 2 schools of thought, and it's natural that people are going to lean to one side and want to kind of stick to that side. Like, we get it, that's human nature. But to take away freedom of speech, or with Project Veritas, how did I don't know how much you know about. Do you know what Project Veritas is?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Project Veritas.
I forgot the guy's name, but yeah,
James O'Keefe.
Very well. Yes, thank you.
So James O'Keefe started an alt-right, as in not like Fox News with a newspaper. So he's basically an organized blogging journalist. Mm-hmm. And he uses undercover tactics, which the left hates, because the left has a very short memory when they want to. You know who initiated undercover camera style of journalism? It was Dan Rather on CBS. He couldn't do it because he was a face, but his people, like James O'Keefe's people, would go out and get people saying stuff on undercover camera, and then Dan Rather himself would go to their house, their actual house, and catch them coming out into their driveway to get in their car. And that was the cornerstone of investigative journalism. Mm-hmm. But now today, when the right is doing it, it's all kinds of bad. It's not real journalism. So what happened that got Project Veritas in trouble here, well, not in trouble, but what the accusation happened was 9 months ago, some third party approached James O'Keefe with Ashley Biden, Joe Biden's daughter's diary. They bought it legally. According to the law, for the morons who don't read the law or know the law and just make assumptions, the law says if you legally obtain information or data as a journalist outlet, even if the person who gives it to you obtained it illegally, as long as you did not have knowledge of it and you did not participate in it, you are legally allowed to publish that information, that data. But James O'Keefe could not confirm that it was Ashley Biden's diary, not to his satisfaction. So instead, 8 months ago, he turned that diary over to the authorities. 8 months later, well, Project Veritas is in the middle of a defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. And for the first time in history, regarding a defamation lawsuit with the New York Times, a judge has ruled that it can go to trial, which is significant because it kicks off depositions. So for the first time in a defamation lawsuit against another paper, the New York Times is going to have to sit down and be deposed. That's really important. And those depositions are allowed to be put on the internet. So coincidentally, Project Veritas has a lawsuit against the New York Times. The now weaponized DOJ and FBI come to James O'Keefe's house and 2 of his reporters to serve search warrants to look. I don't know what they were looking for. I think they were looking for, hypothetically, proof that they participated in the illegal acquisition of Ashley Biden's diary. That's the only thing I can think that they possibly could have justified it as. Here's the important part, the interesting part that was never reported on by the left media. They asked him when they were there, they might have given him a piece of paper, and it said, "We're asking you, though we can't compel you, to not divulge publicly that we served these warrants. The reason is we'll be interviewing other people, excuse me, and their responses to our questioning could be influenced by knowledge that we served these warrants on you." And people could start scrubbing their illegal data. If they know we came after you, they could start hiding stuff. They asked him nicely, and he declined. But before he even got a chance to put out anything publicly, and keep in mind, the FBI said, please don't share it. So arguably, that means they weren't going to share it. It wouldn't make sense if they would and then ask him not to. Within 1 hour of the raid at James O'Keefe's house, he had a phone call from the New York Times asking to give comment on the raid on his house. There's only one way they could have known. The FBI or the DOJ alerted the New York Times that James O'Keefe and Project Veritas were being raided. More disturbing, they made him give up several cell phones. One or more of those cell phones had protected attorney-client privileged communications between James O'Keefe and Project Veritas's and or James O'Keefe's personal lawyers. And 1 day later, the New York Times published stories with direct excerpts from those email communications that could have only come off of the phones. So give me an understanding of how that happened without the FBI handing over attorney-client privileged communications to the New York Times. If you're a human, this should offend you. If you're an American, it should grotesquely offend you. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this should grotesquely offend you. So then we were wondering, how does the DOJ and FBI justify violating Project Veritas and James O'Keefe's right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press? And if you know how the left works, you already suspected it. I did, but it took a couple days until they officially said it. Biden's people came out and said, we do not consider Project Veritas to be a legitimate journalistic outlet. So now the executive branch leader is the one who gets to determine what is and isn't journalism. If you guys were ever afraid of Trump, you should be really afraid of Trump deciding that he gets that too. And remember, the proliferation of executive orders started with Democrats. I think it was Obama came in and did more executive orders than any president in the history of executive orders. And so when Trump came in, he did a lot too. And then Biden set the record on day one. Maybe not the record for total, but on day one, Biden set the record. Why?
He did like 50, I think, for the first day.
A strong statement to his supporters that he was not effing around. He meant business.
Yeah, and what it was is that the people that pull his strings are the ones that just handed him papers, and they briefed him.
Well, he said, you heard the one time he said, I don't even know what I'm signing. I'm just going to sign.
Right. He don't know what he's doing. Like he's completely incompetent, and that's why I have no vote of confidence in him as a commander-in-chief, no matter what operations going on. I'm trying to make sure my glasses are straight here. So,
and Millie, dude, if I was in service, I would resign in protest now. Like I'm getting to. I said it to my mom yesterday, and now I'm going to say it to the world. Like I'm growing more and more less proud to be an American.
Right. I agree.
That sickens me.
No, it's about leadership. You know, your pride should come from a person who believes in your country and does everything it can for the country. It's for the sake of the people that you're under. So anyways, listen, this is going to be almost 3 hours, which is probably the second longest interview that I've had. So I have no problem with that. But it has snowed out. I got to get some shoveling done.
Looks pretty.
Yeah,
it looks pretty.
It's beautiful. But I also have my child who's going to be 20 in April. She's autistic. Wow. But she's had off all week from school. So
you go spend some time with your kid. I appreciate giving the voice.
Oh yeah, I'm glad to get you on here and actually have a conversation, because I don't think we really had a true conversation. We were high five each other, small chatter, but this was great
Well,
opportunity
dude, in
to
closing,
connect.
I'll say that, just me and you personally, our friendship, our relationship,
Hmm.
I think that you would agree that 2 years ago, and I didn't until this, like, I wasn't sure what I was walking in here today. I didn't know which way you bent.
Hmm.
But 2 years, yeah, you certainly know which way I bent, because 2 years ago I started posting on Facebook
Oh yeah.
about politics. But 2 years ago, neither one of us knew nor cared what the other's political leaning was. We knew that each other was a vet, and there's
Hmm.
inherent automatic respect
Hmm.
there for each other's opinions, and we knew that each other were intelligent human beings, and we had respect for the industry. But one of the reasons why we didn't know what each other's political leanings was is, and I'm frankly, I'm surprised. I'm shocked that you have the balls to declare your conservatism, because factually that hurts our ability to work in the entertainment industry. So, like, dude, I
Yep.
tip my hat to you.
Yep.
If more people had the pride of ownership of their thoughts and feelings and what direction they want this country to go in, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in.
I would like to. I don't know if you already know this, but you know who Kevin Sorbo is. You know,
Yep.
played Hercules. Well, I got a chance to meet him and talk to him last May. Well, he moved him and his wife from L.A. to Florida.
Con Studios, right?
Uh, I can't. I don't remember the
I
name
think
of
it's
their
Conflicts or Con Studios, and
something
you
like that.
actually got to speak to him.
Yes, yeah. It was actually at a Christian film festival down in Orlando, and he was just there, open, talking. And this guy, if you want to talk about somebody, he to me, I feel like he's a conservative troll online because he doesn't care. He'll
Yeah.
post if you ever get a chance, go to his Twitter. You'll see everything I'm talking about. But he's the most conservative, most right leaning actor in Hollywood I've ever seen, and he's like, I don't care. I don't care about the money that the certain people. And I'm not going to try to out any certain type of person that actually funds everything. He says, I don't care about that. I'll fund it myself. I'll do my own projects. I don't care. So he does that, and quite frankly, not every film he does, notch, so to speak. It's not the top film, but he's a good actor. He still has all the chops for it, but he is so funny in my opinion. Just listening to how bold he is about saying anything that's on his mind, and mostly, like I said, it's on Twitter. So if you go to Kevin Sorbo's Twitter account, you'll see what I'm talking
I'll
about.
check it out.
Yeah. So,
But
anyways,
Shawn,
yeah,
there's a difference between Kevin Sorbo and you, though.
sure,
Kevin
sure,
Sorbo's Kevin Sorbo's rich. He's already established that he's had a
well
great career.
established.
You know,
Yep,
you're in the middle part of your career, in
yep.
building, right?
Hmm.
So you get a lot more risk
Hmm.
by coming out in a field that is maybe 20% conservative.
Hmm.
And I hope that the conservatives that are in Buffalo, that even if they're not out,
Hmm.
that they consider hiring you or interviewing you for a job. And maybe Kevin Sorbo's company will eventually, expand and bring more conservatives in, because we are exercising our free speech, but in doing so, we're doing it at great personal possible risk to ourselves.
Yep. Just I'm gonna be off camera just for 1 second
No
here.
worries. Yeah. So, like,
Um,
dude, I've been out for 2 years, but I'm proud of you, as a military guy, as a Navy guy, as a Buffalonian, that you're making a stand and you're trying to educate people, because even in just the last couple hours, if we got a couple of people a better understanding about what's going on in Russia and how we can get out of this mess, then it's worth the time that you take to put the content out there.
well, we definitely had some responses on our YouTube chat, and some people are, they're like, sarcastic, like, "Oh, okay, Trump would have." As a matter of fact, I'm going to put one out there. Hang on, let me find that. This was one of the comments.
Too bad we
Uh,
couldn't have done live questions, because
well,
I love
I
debate.
tried to do that, but some people are probably just not. They're not. There, a lot of people are shy.
Right.
When it comes to live stuff like this. Like me, I don't care. I'm ready. But this is one of the comments. So Trump would have agreed to no NATO and Ukraine, whatever. I think that's a question. I think it was a sarcastic question.
Yeah, and I mean, it's obviously that guy thinks that he wouldn't have. It's hard to say, but for sure, Trump would have jacked up. Trump would have never decreased our oil production.
Hmm.
So why Putin's able to fund the war? It's because we pulled back our oil production. We became a customer. We're making Putin rich.
Yeah.
You know how the Soviet Union broke apart in the first place was we bankrupted them. Reagan outspent them. The money is always important.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of money in this country, that's for sure, flowing around like it's nothing.
I'm going to go read all those comments. Is it okay if I comment in as long as I'm nice and I don't swear?
You do what you want to do. That's your prerogative.
I'll tell you,
I'm not going to censor nobody.
Anybody puts a question in, I will find the time to answer it. Anybody wants to call me up, I'll give you my burner number. I don't put my real cell number out there anymore.
I do want to correct you on something. You did say maybe in the journalism arena, maybe what was it? Tom from NBC. Who'd you say was like the person that did all these undercover? Tom.
I thought it was Dan Rather.
Dan Rather. I'm sorry. That's right. So I want to correct you. Maybe in a journalistic sense, Dan Rather did it, but I want to tell you who actually was the best undercover person, and I'll show it right now. Back in the day, 1960, Candid Camera.
Okay? Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that, dude.
Alan Funt.
Totally forgot about that.
He was the man when it comes to candid cameras, undercover or whatnot. So I guess he passed away in 1999. But from 1960 to 1975, he had a show called The Candid Camera. And look at, that's pretty much all his IMDb credits there.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty amazing. Now remember, I watched the show. I did. I totally. Yeah, I mean, Dan Rather didn't invent it, but I just say Dan Rather because Dan Rather is a hero of the left, and it's like if it was okay for Dan Rather then, why is it not okay for James O'Keefe now? Like, I don't like the two rules system thing.
Mm-hmm. So no, I mean, I just on the lighter side, I'm just trying to exit on kind of a lighter side.
I love it.
That's kind of why I brought that up. So, Alan, listen, my buddy, I'm so happy that we had a chance to chat. I'm glad that you had your opportunity to vent. We're going to be sharing these links everywhere. And who knows, we might get flagged, we might get banned, but I still have it recorded, and I have my own website. I can always put it up. So
nice.
I will never be silenced if given the opportunity to say what I got to say. But also, my guests, I want them to say what they, whether I'm totally, heated against or for. I'm not going to try to silence somebody for their thinking, their belief, because I believe free thinking is the way we mature, the way we grow as a society. So,
well, and if I'm able to get a house here and I come back like I want to, maybe a couple old Navy guys can get together and get a beer. Maybe Scott will even join us. I'm always
he's
willing
in Kansas
to extend the out. Oh, okay.
He's in Kansas, Missouri, and he's a Chiefs fan. So we and him had some rivalry there last couple years.
Next season, we're going to get them then.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. They hated us. Yes, absolutely, Alan. Thank you, Pietruszewski.
Pietruszewski. Good to see you. And hopefully next time in person for a beer.
Awesome, man. God bless. Thanks for coming on. And tune in, ShawnPGreene.com. You got all the social media sites you can donate to if anybody here wants to support what we're doing, and go to the podcast, and feel free to call next time. Leave a message now. If you got a comment about anything that was said today, feel free to leave a comment, text it, or just leave a voicemail. It doesn't matter. We'll play it maybe on Monday. So every Monday, every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m., I plan to be here all the time live, and then we'll pre-record it for maybe a couple other interviews in the future. But as far as the live version, this is what we're doing. But Alan, thanks again for coming on. Thanks for your input, and I'm excited for the future, and excited for the future Buffalo film in general.
Yes.
I hope we got some big plans coming. We got some great teams. Buffalo casting is in the house. Everybody's bringing big projects here, so we hope that we can stay busy long term here.
And we got Buffalo casting Buffalo. We got great film commission. We got 3 studios being built, and a lot of burgeoning talent in Buffalo. I see it every time I come back.
Absolutely. All right, Alan. God bless. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
All right, buddy.
All right. So, once again, Alan Pietruszewski, a great man, a great person, great human being, a good actor, a great actor, and he's building his community with the veterans as well, trying to get veterans all kinds of opportunities to be a part of film, to be on film, to be represented in the film industry. And I'm, excited to have a friendship with him. Not only is he a Buffalonian, I think he's from the East Side originally, Lancaster, he said, and I'm from South Buffalo, West Seneca, kind of come back and forth, but I live here in South Buffalo right now. We're going to do this every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. So, it's snowing out. I got a shovel. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to leave you with my little introduction to my I guess biopic or documentary of what I've done. Here's a film that I did for college for UB back in 2019, and I call it Serious Service. So give me 1 second. We'll get to it. It's called Serious Service. Shawn P. Greene. It's meant to be not just comical, but it's meant to be. Okay, stop. All right. It's meant to be comical, but it's also meant to be informative, like a documentary of my transition from high school to being in the military. And it's not complete. I still have a lot of things to do with it, but I'm going to leave you and end you with this. Hope you enjoyed the show today. I enjoyed listening to my friend Alan. And so here it is. This is a snippet of my documentary to my life. Just a small piece of the puzzle.
I work at Burger King making flavor whoppers. I wear paper.
Hello, Jim.
I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York, 1971. I was a pretty timid boy until high school, where I was sort of.
All right. We're going to bring it back to the car. Just a second.
I worked a lot of fast food restaurants up until I graduated in 1989 from West Seneca West. During that time, nothing was serious to me. It was all fun and games. I knew if I didn't go into the military, I wouldn't have a future. I graduated boot camp in September 1989. I learned a lot about myself and about other people. It was the first time getting out of my own city, experiencing something new. Shortly after basic training, I went to Airman Apprentice training. And then I got assigned my duty station to USS Ranger. I was working for V4 Division, which is the aviation fuels and then air department. I worked on the flight deck, which was my ultimate goal as a teenager. Many of us were inspired to join the Navy because of Top Gun. I was also inspired by the TV show Super Carrier, which was short-lived.
but I achieved my first goal in my life was to be working on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier.
All right, everybody. So as you can see,
I decided I needed another vacation, so
little
the end of July and the beginning of
little
August,
background.
for a week off,
If you guys want to check that out, ShawnPGreene.com. Go to my YouTube channel. All that stuff is on there. Thanks for watching. Another great episode.
San Diego.
Sometimes I'll have a guest. Sometimes
While
I'll
it was
just
gone,
do stuff. You know what I'm saying? So, but go ahead, check it out if you want. ShawnPGreene.com. Go ahead and donate. Shawn, go to the podcast. I got all kinds of stuff coming up. All kinds of material, short films, documentaries. Things are happening. Things are popping. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you for listening, for watching, and just keep it locked.